Chapter 1040. Therefore, this array unique to the blood race couldn't compare to the various arrays of the human race, to a certain extent. Once the various arrays of the human race were activated, they would increase the strength of the people who formed them to varying degrees. After the first blood river was destroyed, Lu Yi, Dao 13, and the other Dao soldiers appeared, surrounded by a large number of blood race cultivators. The sword gourd at Lu Ye's waist vibrated and streaks of sword light shot out, accompanied by miserable screams. In such a chaotic battlefield where enemies were everywhere, a true lake-stage soldier cultivator would not be of much use, especially since the blood arts of the blood breeds had a strong corrosive effect on spiritual weapons. Among the saber arts he could use, only the crescent moon was suitable for such a battlefield. However, crescent moon consumed a lot of energy, so Lu Yi didn't use his saber and took out the sword gourd instead. There was a large amount of sword qi sealed inside the sword gourd, which was suitable for the current situation. Not all members of the blood race were able to conjure their own blood river. This was an ability that only members of the true lake stage possessed. Those of the cloud river stage were unable to do so. They could only conjure a blood fog to envelop themselves. While the sword qi in the sword gourd was raging, Lu Ye's divine sense surged and led his Dao soldiers into another blood river. The strength distribution of the human race cultivators in the Jade Blood Holy Land was actually quite awkward. There were a lot of top powerhouses, and dozens of old seniors could be said to be the mainstay of the Jade Blood Holy Land. There were also a lot of cultivators at the grassroots level. This was the case everywhere, and it was the same for the major sects of the 9 regions. However, there were very few orthodox masters, such as those between the 5th and 9th order Divine Sea realms. This couldn't be helped. The Jade Blood Holy Land had only been established for 30 years. Even though Feng Wujiang had migrated a large number of humans from the surrounding 100,000 kilometers of the Divine Gate Sea, and had the support of the 9 states, and the old seniors had personally taught the human race cultivation, the time was too short. It was very difficult for the Holy Land's human race to reach the 5th order. This was also the biggest disadvantage of the human race in every battle with the blood race. It was true that the elders could slaughter the blood race army as they pleased, but the human race would always suffer a crushing defeat in a proper battle of experts. If it weren't for the elders holding them back, the human race would have been defeated a long time ago. The appearance of the twin Qi-linked branches array disk smoothed out this gap to a great extent. Even if several human race cultivators at the 1st or 2nd order Divine Sea realm formed an array, they would still have the capital to contend with a 5th order Divine Sea realm enemy, and they would most likely have the upper hand. Lu Ye's vampiric Dao soldiers were all the more precious. Thus, his mission in this battle wasn't to kill the blood tribe cultivators at the Cloud River tier and True Lake tier. These enemies could be left to the humans of equal strength. He wanted to find blood tribe cultivators at the Spirit Ocean tier to kill. Only then would he be able to reduce the pressure on the humans. Of course, Lu Yi would not show mercy to those who could be easily eliminated. It was just a matter of convenience, so why not? Although the battlefield was chaotic, Lu Yi had his divine will. It was not difficult for him to find a blood race warrior of the Divine Sea realm. There were many Divine Sea realm warriors among the blood race. One Divine Sea realm blood race cultivator after another died under the 9 palace array. Lu Yi had never killed Divine Sea realm cultivators to his heart's content since he started cultivating. Of course, he also knew that this was not his own ability. This was the overall strength of the Dao soldiers in him. However, if one walked the road at night too often, they would eventually meet a ghost. His performance attracted the attention of many blood race cultivators, mainly because they did not understand why he had the help of their own race's masters. Dao soldiers had never appeared on the battlefield between the 2 races before. This time, the blood race suffered a great loss as soon as they were brought out. After killing the blood clan members in the Divine Sea realm in one of the rivers of blood and escaping, another river of blood came crashing down and enveloped him, Dao Shursan, and the rest of the Dao soldiers. Then, with a flash of blood-red light, a figure seemed to float in front of him. Lu Yi instinctively pulled out his mountain coiling saber and slashed forward. A clanging sound rang out as a huge force swept over. Lu Yi felt his arm go numb, and the blood in his chest tumble. If it were not for the help of the array, he would have been at a disadvantage. It was an 8th Order Divine Sea Realm Blood Race cultivator. Lu Yi instantly judged the other party's cultivation. Among the Blood Race cultivators he had killed before, the highest cultivation was only at the 6th Order Divine Sea Realm. It could be said that this was the strongest Blood Race cultivator he had encountered so far. It was not that there were no 9th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivators. There were hundreds of thousands of them in the Blood Race army, and 9th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivators were everywhere. However, the top Divine Sea Realm cultivators were currently besieging the human race's old seniors. Every Blood Race cultivator had their own battlefield. With the Dao soldiers around him, Lu Yi could clearly see the enemy's position. He had done this before when he killed the enemy. The only ones who knew the details of the Blood River were always the Blood Race cultivators themselves. As long as he could find the location of the main body of a Blood Race cultivator, killing the enemy was not difficult. However, the situation was different this time. The enemy's cultivation was too high and his movements were too fast. Although Lu Yi could clearly see his position, it was useless if he could not keep up with his speed. With a thought, Lu Yi urged the power of his talent tree. Before the battle, he had considered how to deal with such a master. Borrowing the power of his talent tree was undoubtedly the best way. Roots invisible to the naked eye stretched out and plunged into the Blood River, devouring it. Lu Yi could even devour the power of the real Blood River, let alone the secret technique of a Blood Race cultivator. Moreover, the Blood River that the Blood Race cultivators used didn't appear out of thin air. It was a manifestation of their strength, and the energy contained in it was extremely rich. As such, Lu Yi urging his talent tree to devour the Blood River was equivalent to devouring the heritage of the Blood Race master. With the 9 Palace Chain Array, this 8th Order Divine Sea Realm Blood Race cultivator couldn't do anything to Lu Yi for the time being. Although Lu Yi couldn't do anything to him, it was impossible for them to remain in this stalemate forever. When the time came, it would be the Blood Race who would suffer. As time passed, the Blood River would collapse on its own, and the Blood Race cultivator's strength would be damaged. The changes in the Blood River naturally couldn't be hidden from the Blood Race cultivator. After all, it was a manifestation of his strength. The moment he realized something was wrong, he cried out, "What are you?" It had always been the Blood Race who devoured the blood of the human race, but he never thought that one day he would see a human devouring a Blood Race cultivator. 2K While he was still in shock, he saw Lu Yi biting a blood crystal in his mouth. With a grunt he crushed it. After such a long battle, he had consumed a lot of his spirit chi, so he took this opportunity to replenish it. But when the Blood Race cultivator saw this scene, he couldn't help but be shocked. Feeling the power of the Blood River rapidly weakening, he didn't dare to continue maintaining this secret technique. He immediately rolled up his body and allowed the Blood River to quickly merge into his body. Lu Yi saw the light of day, and the flying wing spirit crests on his back unfolded. With the support of wind travel, he rushed towards the Spirit Sea Realm Blood Race cultivator like a bolt of lightning. Dao 13 and the other Blood Race Dao soldiers followed like shadows, instantly engulfing the enemy. Holding the mountain coiling saber in front of him, Lu Yi thrust it forward, causing specks of starlight to flicker. Tyrannical First Form Starry Sky. Facing this attack, the Blood Race cultivator wasn't afraid. With his 8th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivation, he had the capital to be fearless. Sending his divine sense towards Lu Yi, he stretched out his hand and stabbed towards Lu Yi's chest with his sharp fingernails. If this attack connected, Lu Yi might not be able to survive even with the protection of the Scarlet Dragon battle robe. But at this moment, the spirit chi around the Blood Race cultivator suddenly became chaotic, and a petal appeared out of thin air. The petal was huge, and under the Blood Race cultivator's stunned gaze, it wrapped him tightly in an instant. The Blood Race cultivator's sharp fingernails stopped at Lu Yi's chest, but Lu Yi's saber had already descended. Blood splattered as the Blood Race cultivator's body stiffened. At the same time, Dao 13 punched out with his fists, and the other Blood Race Dao soldiers also clawed out. In a one-on-one fight, no one was his opponent, but under the cover of this array, who would dare to fight him one-on-one? This was a group attack tactic. Lu Yi put away his saber and rushed towards the direction of another Spirit Sea Realm Blood Race cultivator. The 8th Order Blood Race cultivator behind him had already turned into a pile of minced meat. He didn't even have time to dig out his blood crystal. 2,000 meters away, on the city wall, Yuji smiled slightly and withdrew her slender jade finger, her spirit chi slowly calming down. On the Blue Blood Holy Land side, there were about 70 seniors from the 9 states who were still alive. On average, each island could be guarded by 6 or 7 people. However, the island where Lu Yi was located only had Meng Jie and Yuji. The reason for this arrangement was because of the Blood Race Dao soldiers that Lu Yi had trained. With over 100 Blood Race Dao soldiers, there was no need for too many seniors. Meng Jie had already killed his way out, and Lu Yi and the Dao soldiers followed closely behind, but Yuji was still here. Naturally, she wasn't just here to watch the show. As the top Dharma cultivator from the 9 states, even if she just stood here, the Blood Race cultivators she targeted wouldn't have a good ending. However, because she had to be on guard, she couldn't take action often. She could still lend Lu Yi a hand at a critical moment. The petal that wrapped around the Blood Race cultivator just now was her work. She might not have a good way to deal with the Blood Race cultivator hiding in the Blood River. But since he revealed himself, he was a target for her. The battlefield was chaotic, and Lu Yi could feel streaks of earth-shattering auras colliding continuously. Those were the seniors from the 9 states displaying their might. Almost every senior was surrounded by a large number of Blood Race cultivators at the Divine Ocean Realm. They weren't afraid of death, and they used their bodies and lives to restrain these seniors. There were also solo fights, and those were the Blood Race's Saint Seeds. Although the seniors were powerful, the Saint Seeds weren't ordinary either. Almost every Saint Seed had the power to match those seniors. Lu Yi previously thought that he was the only Saint Seed on the Star Moon Saint's side. Now he knew that he was wrong. The Star Moon Saint wasn't the only Saint Seed on the northern battlefront. There were at least 5 of them. Previously, they had concealed themselves, and Lu Yi couldn't sense them. Now that they had revealed themselves, their powerful might was obvious. The Blood Race army's attack never stopped. The humans had some concerns, and they could only maintain the battlefront a few hundred feet away from the island. They couldn't advance because they couldn't receive support from the rear, and they couldn't retreat because the Blood Race would break through the defensive line. This area of a few hundred feet had become a forbidden zone for life. The Blood Race suffered heavy casualties, and the humans also suffered heavy casualties. This was the case for this battle, and it was the same for all the previous battles. Chapter 1041. On the chaotic battlefield, Lu Yi felt like he was surrounded by enemies from all directions. This was one of the advantages of not having to worry about accidentally injuring his own people. But the downside was that he was constantly fighting with others, and there was no time for him to rest. Fortunately, it was easy for him to replenish his own energy, but it wasn't so convenient for other human cultivators. If this went on, the human race would definitely be weakened. Of course, it was the same for the Blood Race. The Blood Race's situation was more serious, because they didn't have support from the rear. On the human race's side, the array formation on the small island never stopped providing support. Although it wasn't as dense as before, it still continued to work and killed many Blood Race cultivators. At this point, the battle had become a competition of tenacity between both sides. The Blood Race's million-strong army came aggressively. They originally wanted to take down the Jade Blood Sacred Ground in one fell swoop. They had the capital and confidence to do so. If it was the Sacred Ground 2 months ago, the probability of stopping the Blood Race's attack was less than 30%. However, with the popularization of the Twin Chi and Branch Formation, and the Twin Chi and Branch Formation that was set up on the small islands, it became the greatest help for the human race. This infuriated many Blood Race experts. Lu Yi wasn't sure about the situation on the other small islands, because the battlefield was too vast and chaotic. With his pitiful divine thought, he couldn't detect too far away. However, based on the current situation, The small island he was in charge of had a good defense. He didn't need to care about the situation on the other small islands. Each small island had a few seniors in charge, and they would only do better than him. Just as Lu Yi was thinking about this, he suddenly felt a great sense of danger. An invisible terror lingered in his heart, and then a great pressure came from afar. He looked up and saw a bloody light rushing toward him. That bloody light shuttled nimbly on the battlefield, and was 3 miles away in the blink of an eye. Star Moon Holy Venerable. Lu Yi knew who was targeting him. Since the beginning of the battle, Star Moon Holy Venerable had been holding down the fort at the back and hadn't intervened. However, he had no choice but to take action now. What Lu Yi didn't expect was that this guy would target him first. Was it the existence of the Blood Race's Dao soldiers that attracted his attention? There was a possibility. This was the first time Dao soldiers had appeared on the battlefield of the war between the two races. Moreover, the other Blood Race Dao soldiers all had their own formations. Only his side had 2 more human figures. This was a little eye-catching. The Star Moon Holy Sovereign probably wanted to understand the profoundness of the Dao weapon. Hence, he came to look for Xiao Chen directly. However, Lu Yi did not panic in the slightest. He did not even have any intention of retreating. This was because he knew that someone was watching the holy venerables of the blood race. It would have been fine if Xingyue had not made a move. However, since she had made a move, it was not up to him to make a move. With his small arms and legs, killing some blood breeds at the Divine Ocean Realm was the right thing to do. As expected, a sonorous sword hum rang out, and a beam of sword light pierced out diagonally toward the Star Moon Saint, stopping him 3 lis away. Then a great battle broke out. Violent repercussions swept out, and the entire Divine Watchtower seemed to be seething. The 2 figures entangled with each other and spun into the air like a top, quickly leaving the main battlefield. Lu Yi looked up and could vaguely see Jian Guhong's figure in the sword light. High up in the sky, there were many small battlefields that had been set up individually. Those were the places where the holy seeds and the old seniors fought. The repercussions of their battle were too terrifying. Only by staying far away from the main battlefield could they avoid being swept in by the cultivators of the 2 races. The blood race's holy venerables would definitely not consider this. To them, it did not matter how many blood breeds died. If the blood race's death could drag a human cultivator down with them, it would be worth it. However, since they were going against the old seniors, the choice of the battlefield was not up to them. The old seniors from the 9 states naturally had the means to shift the battlefield away. Lu Yi retreat. At this moment, a gentle voice rang in Lu Ye's ears. Without any hesitation, he led his 8 Dao soldiers and retreated to the back. He landed on the wall of the small island, but there was no trace of Yu Ji nearby. Lu Yi frowned. He knew that something was wrong. Yu Ji was this small island's strongest defense. She had to stay here all the time to prevent the blood race's strong cultivators from taking advantage of her. However, she had disappeared at this moment. Clearly, something unexpected had happened. Before she disappeared, she sent a voice transmission to Lu Yi, asking him to retreat and take over her position. Under normal circumstances, Lu Yi did not have this ability. However, if he formed a formation with the Dao soldiers, he could barely do it for a while. Looking around, he still could not see Yu Ji's figure. Lu Yi immediately cast his gaze into the blood sea. There was no reason for such a big living person to disappear into thin air, let alone a strong cultivator like Yu Ji. Since she was not in his field of vision, there was only one place left. Yu Ji had entered deep into the blood sea. Almost at the same time that Lu Yi cast his gaze into the blood sea, a huge bubble surged out from the depths of the blood sea, mixed with violent spiritual energy fluctuations. The small island buzzed and trembled, as if there was an earthquake. Yu Ji was fighting with someone, and the only thing that could fight with her was the holy seed. A holy seed had secretly dived into the blood sea. In the blood refinement realm, the blood race's feelings toward the blood sea were very complicated. Before they reached adulthood, they absorbed nutrients from the blood sea to grow stronger. However, after they reached adulthood, the blood sea was a forbidden land that they could not easily touch. No one knew why this was so. They had spent countless years like this. However, the blood race had the chance to enter deep into the blood sea to cleanse their bloodline and become stronger. Of course, the risk was extremely high. Back then, Zhang Julai wanted to enter deep into the blood sea to cleanse his bloodline, so that he could continue to serve Lu Yi. In the end, he failed as expected. But to the holy seeds, the blood sea was a place that they could go as they pleased. They would even cultivate in the blood sea, maintaining a rapid pace of growth until their cultivation reached the peak, unable to advance any further. The Jade Blood Sacred Land used the vast Shenkai Sea as a barrier. Although this gave countless ordinary blood race a headache, there was also a drawback. That was, the holy seeds could use the cover of the blood sea to approach them silently. In the past, the destruction of the outer islands was basically related to this. In this regard, the old seniors of the human race were naturally on guard. This was also the reason why every small island had an old senior overseeing it. It was to prevent such a thing from happening. Now, Yu Ji was fighting with the holy seed under the blood sea. Lu Yi did not know who was stronger and who was weaker. He only knew that if Yu Ji did not quickly think of a way to move the battlefield away, this small island would not be able to hold on. The island trembled incessantly. Lu Yi could not even stand steadily. Large amounts of cracks began to appear on the city walls, looking as if it would collapse at any moment. Fortunately, Yu Ji did not disappoint Lu Yi. After about 10 breaths of time, the blood sea's waves rolled, and two figures emerged one after the other. One of them was Yu Ji. It was unknown what kind of miraculous technique she used, but the holy seed had no choice but to obediently follow behind her. In the blink of an eye, they became two dots of light in the sky. The island's trembling did not stop. Under the sea, powerful energy fluctuations were undulating. Another figure arrived in a flash. With a serious expression, he directly jumped into the blood sea. Lu Yi did not recognize this old senior, but he was obviously from the 9 states. Soon, this old senior rushed out of the blood sea, but there was no sign of the holy seed. Lu Yi was puzzled. He originally thought that there was another holy seed causing trouble under the sea, but it did not seem to be the case. Sensing Lu Ye's gaze, this old senior looked up and sighed. "We can't keep it." Lu Yi immediately understood that the holy seed had left some special means under the sea. Yu Ji might not have discovered it, but it was more likely that she had discovered it, but could not do anything about it. Demon Suppressing Museum. The only thing she could do was take the holy seed away. The island's trembling became more and more intense. The city's walls continued to collapse, and the earth began to crack open. Blood poured in. Amidst cries of alarm, many human cultivators on the island rose into the air. In a short while, the island sank more than 30 meters, and it looked like it would be submerged by the blood-red sea. Without the support of the defensive fortifications on the island behind them, the human cultivators on the battlefield were instantly in a dire situation. Originally, with the support from the rear, the human side could not be said to have a great advantage, but there was no problem in maintaining the situation. However, the island had sunk and the defenses had all been destroyed. Without the support from the rear, the pressure on the front suddenly increased. There was still an endless stream of vampires joining the battlefield, and there was no end to it. Beside Lu Yi, that old senior had already turned into a streak of light and charged into the enemy group. At the same time, he issued an order. Retreat! The human race's strength was limited, and they could not waste their forces on this kind of entanglement. With that order, the human cultivators retreated as they fought, and soon, they had retreated to the island's original location. More and more cultivators gathered, and almost all of them were injured, but their eyes were incomparably resolute. They each formed a formation and stood in the air. The island was gone, but they were still there. Flesh and blood were also a line of defense. The vampires under Lu Ye's command also charged back. Of the 100 or so vampires, they had lost 20 or so, and only 70 or so survived. It was clear to see how intense the battle was. The human cultivators retreated, but the battle was still fierce. The old senior was surrounded by a large number of vampires, and his figure could no longer be seen in the distance. Suddenly, a ray of light bloomed, and then it became as bright as day. Under the cover of the light, the unpredictable vampires transformed into vampires. The 5 old seniors' figures were revealed, and spiritual energy surged around their bodies. There were no survivors within 100 meters of them. However, after a moment of silence, vampires from all directions continued to charge toward him. There were even vampires swarming toward Lu Yi and the others, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. A gap had been torn in the outer defense line of the Jade Blood Holy Land. This was an opportunity for the vampires, and they naturally would not let it go. Looking at the swarm of vampires, Lu Ye's divine sense surged, and he issued an order to all the vampires. In the next moment, the blood energy around the 70-odd divine sea realm vampires surged and gathered, forming a huge river of blood. Chapter 1042. A gigantic river of blood suddenly appeared in the sky above the small island. It could no longer be called a river of blood, but a sea of blood. Of course, it paled in comparison to the real sea of blood beneath their feet, but it still formed a majestic line of defense. After all, this was the gathering of more than 70 divine ocean realm blood tribe cultivators' blood Dao secret technique. Coupled with the help of the twin Qi binding formation disc, the Sea of Blood's aura was uniform and displayed great power. The Sea of Blood surged and wriggled as if it was alive. The Blood Tribe army was approaching, and the Blood Tribe's secret techniques blasted into it, creating layers of ripples. Beside the Sea of Blood in midair, there were many human cultivators who had lost their foothold. They used all kinds of methods to fight against the Blood Tribe. For a moment, streams of light intersected, and the scene was chaotic. However, there were fewer humans, and it was easy for them to be at a disadvantage in such a battle. In a short while they were suppressed to the point that they almost couldn't fight back, and many of them died. At this moment, the Sea of Blood wriggled and expanded, enveloping all the humans. After losing sight of the human cultivators, the Blood Tribe charged into the Sea of Blood. In an instant, spiritual power surged inside the Sea of Blood. In the Sea of Blood, Lu Yi and the Dao soldiers formed a formation. Their auras were closely connected as they swam in this chaotic environment. Everywhere they passed, a bloody storm was set off. The Blood Sea was formed by more than 70 Dao soldiers of the Blood race, using a secret technique. This was their home ground, and they were under Lu Ye's command. How could the Blood race army have a good ending if they plunged into this place? Lu Yi just kept slashing with his saber, and almost every slash was effective. He didn't need to deliberately find a target at all. The Blood Tribe Dao soldiers would guide him, and even send the Blood Tribe members who had fallen into the Sea of Blood to him. The many human cultivators also received the same treatment. It could be said that in this vast Sea of Blood, each of them had an invisible helper by their side to help them kill the enemy and avoid risks. The Blood Tribe suffered continuous casualties, and the blood of the dead Blood Tribe expanded the scale of the Sea of Blood. From the outside, the huge Sea of Blood was wriggling and changing like a rapidly growing monster. There was still an endless stream of Blood Tribe members rushing into the Sea of Blood. There were also Blood Tribe members who wanted to cross the Sea of Blood and kill their way in from the sky. However, the Sea of Blood seemed to have eyes. From time to time, blood-colored whips would split from the Sea of Blood and sweep these Blood Tribe cultivators, who tried to cross into the Sea of Blood. All Blood Tribe members who were swept into the Sea of Blood were either killed or injured. For a time, no Blood Tribe members were able to break through the Sea of Blood. Some people from the small islands on the left and right also came to help. Everyone knew that they couldn't let the vampires break through here. Otherwise, the mortals on the island would suffer heavy casualties. Although a hole had been torn in the defensive line, it was now replaced by the Blood Race Dao soldiers' secret techniques. Instead, it became more flexible. This was an opportunity for the human race. Lu Yi no longer bothered to find his target. He stood together with Dao Shursan, while chewing blood crystals to replenish his energy. The mountain saber in his hand was ready to strike at any blood who dared to appear in front of him. The master and servant would greet them with a saber and a fist. Basically, no Blood Tribe member could stop them. It wasn't that no Divine Sea Realm Blood Race cultivators had entered this place, But those blood race cultivators could only fight on their own. How could they compete with this huge blood sea? In this blood sea, any blood race cultivator who entered would be greatly suppressed. Even a 7th order Divine Sea Realm blood race cultivator would only be able to display the strength of a 4th or 5th order cultivator. The killing never stopped since the beginning. Every moment, there would be movements of blood tribe members around him. They were either humans or blood tribe members. Lu Yi didn't even know which side had the upper hand in the current situation. In such a large-scale battle, the strength of an individual was too small. He could only do what he had to do. Kill the enemy. Kill as many enemies as possible. He believed that everyone else was doing the same. Time passed by very slowly. Lu Yi didn't know how many blood tribe members he had killed. At first, enemies were constantly sent to him, but gradually, the frequency decreased. In the end, Lu Yi stood in place and waited for the blood tribe members to arrive. He had to take the initiative to attack, but his gains were few. He didn't know why this happened. Maybe it was because most of the blood tribe members had been killed. Great God Momo's Human Race Great Saint. Translator, Cetalin Editor. Cetalin Vampires Leave to Read for Free. _ the fastest to update the latest chapter. Perhaps the blood race had broken through the defensive line of the Blood Sea and attacked the Jade Blood Holy Land. He hoped it was the former, until a certain moment, a gentle voice suddenly entered their ears from an unknown direction. Come out, all of you. The vampires have retreated. Lu Yi stared blankly for a moment, then flew up into the air with Dao Shursan. A moment later, they were out of the range of the Sea of Blood. As far as the eye could see, there were no longer any blood breeds around the archipelago. Only the bloody light of the blood breeds could be seen further away. Deafening cheers could be heard coming from all around. The surviving human cultivators were celebrating and venting their frustrations. Lu Yi gasped for breath, his face as pale as a sheet of paper, and his boiling murderous intent was difficult to calm down. Are you okay? Yu Ji asked with concern. Lu Yi shook his head blankly. Suddenly, he looked down at the blood sea below. This was the blood sea formed by more than 70 blood race Dao soldiers under his command using a secret technique. However, the current state of the blood sea was clearly not right. Its scale was more than 5 times larger than before. Moreover, it was wriggling violently, sometimes expanding and sometimes contracting. It looked extremely unstable. Lu Ye's divine will surged as he ordered all the Dao soldiers to dispel the secret technique. However, it was useless. The blood sea wriggled even more violently. One could vaguely see that it wanted to split apart, but was unable to do so. This was the strangeness of the Blood Clan's secret technique. Although the Blood Clan's blood rivers could be compatible with each other and work together to defend against the enemy, they couldn't be maintained for too long. Otherwise, there would be a situation where it was difficult to split apart. This was because if too much time passed, the blood rivers of different blood clans would truly merge together. Especially this time, there were more than 70 blood race Dao soldiers fusing together. Moreover, they had even used the branches of kindred spirit, which made the fusion even more thorough. No matter how powerful one was, one had to pay a price. This blood sea became the defensive line after the small island was destroyed. It created a great geographical advantage and helped the human race resist the attack of the blood race army. However, the price was that they could no longer be separated. The figures of human cultivators followed closely behind Lu Yi as they surged out of the blood sea. All of them were in a sorry state and were injured. There were even some who were missing arms and legs. The cruelty of a large-scale battle was displayed in front of Lu Yi for the first time. There were not many human cultivators who survived, less than 30% of the initial number. It could be foreseen that if the blood race's attack was even more ferocious, this side might not be able to defend. At that time, the blood race army would be able to invade through the gap here. The consequences would be unimaginable. The blood sea wriggled even more violently. Waves of panic were transmitted from the blood sea. It was the struggle of the blood race Dao soldiers. Lu Yi sighed. He raised his hand and slowly pressed down, sending a final order to the Dao soldiers. The struggle stopped. The huge blood sea slowly sank down as Lu Yi pressed down with his hand. In the end, it fell into the real blood sea. The waves surged, and the two merged into one, no longer distinguishable from each other. The greatest contributor to this battle didn't have a good ending. Even though they were all blood race, Lu Yi still couldn't help but sigh. A figure descended from the sky and landed in front of Lu Yi. It was Feng Wujiang. He looked at Lu Yi with a shocked expression. "Junior brother, are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine." Lu Yi shook his head. This shake was fine, but it instantly made him feel like the world was spinning. He couldn't help but stagger. He reached out and grabbed Dao Shisan's arm. "I feel a little dizzy." "Yes." Ring. The crisp sound of a bell rang out. A slender finger touched Lu Ye's forehead. Yuji's voice sounded. "If you're tired, rest well." "Yes." Her voice was soft, as if she was whispering in her sleep. Lu Yi glanced at her and finally closed his eyes, falling asleep instantly. Dao Shisan grabbed him by the collar to prevent him from falling. "I've used up too much energy." Yuji looked at Feng Wujiang. In this battle, Lu Yi had been constantly replenishing his energy. The consumption of his spiritual power and soul power was unprecedented. Ordinary cultivators would constantly use up their energy in battle, and the power they could unleash was what their body could bear. But Lu Yi was different, because he replenished his energy. "I'll provide you with the latest chapter of Great God Momo's The Great Sage of Human Tao." Chapter 1042. Battle Vampires Leave to Read for Free. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The consumption of energy was very simple, so he maintained the highest level of power from beginning to end. When he was focused on killing the enemy, he didn't notice anything. But once the battle ended, his tense nerves relaxed, and the tiredness surged up like a tidal wave. He couldn't take it anymore. Feng Wujiang scanned with his spiritual will and knew Lu Ye's current situation. His life wasn't in danger. He just needed to rest for a while. "Send him back. Ask Granny Jiu to heal him." "Yes." Yuji nodded. "Of course." "Yes." It was all thanks to Lu Ye's vampiric Dao soldiers that they were able to defend the gap in the defense line. Although it wasn't Lu Ye's credit, the dazzling performance of the kindred in this battle couldn't be concealed. Judging from the vampire's strength and formation in this battle, the Jade Blood Sacred Land would have been hard-pressed to protect if it hadn't been for the Twin Spirit Disc. At that time, the elders could only lead a group of people to fight their way out. The sacred land would have been destroyed, the human race would have been slaughtered, and decades of hard work would have turned to dust. Wave after wave of cheers continued unabated. They were celebrating for defeating the vampires again today. Feng Wujiang sighed amidst the waves of cheers. They could defeat the vampires this time and protect the Jade Blood Sacred Land. But what about next time? The human race had indeed won this battle, but they had also lost. One of the 11 islands around the sacred island had been destroyed, opening a gap in the defense line. If there was a next time, the vampires would definitely concentrate their forces in this direction. At that time, the human race would be hard-pressed to defend. As the master of the sacred land, Feng Wujiang had to look further. He couldn't help but worry. One had to know that the vampires grew very quickly. Even if they suffered heavy losses this time, it wouldn't take long for them to recover and stage a comeback. The human race, on the other hand, didn't have such an advantage. To see the latest update of the Great Sage of Human Tao, please enter in your browser. Providing you with the latest update of the Great Sage of Human Tao. Momo. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Vampires Retreat. Free reading. Chapter 1043. Pa 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 sounds kept ringing out. Lu Yi woke up from his deep sleep and immediately sensed that something was wrong. He was actually lying on a bed, and someone was frantically patting his back. Just as he was about to move, a voice sounded in his ear. "Dao friend, you've been in a long battle and your flesh is torn. Don't act rashly for now." Lu Yi tilted his head to look, only to see a white-robed youth smiling warmly at him. From the spiritual energy waves emanating from his body, he was evidently at the true lake stage. Furthermore, his spiritual energy was of the wood attribute. With each strike, a gentle energy was imprinted into his body, mending his torn flesh. Lu Yi felt his entire body aching, especially his right arm. He felt like he couldn't muster any strength. He immediately understood that the young man was right. His previous battle had lasted for too long, and he had been maintaining his strongest state. This had caused his flesh and blood to be damaged. This youth was obviously healing his wounds. Medical cultivator? Lu Yi asked. Dao Friend's eyes are sharp. I am indeed a medical cultivator. The youth smiled in response, but his hands didn't stop moving. Thank you. Lu Yi enjoyed the treatment with a clear conscience. Although he would be more satisfied if it was a female cultivator doing this, since the other party was healing his wounds, he naturally couldn't say anything. Lu Yi wasn't a talkative person, but the young medical cultivator had a lively personality. As he healed Lu Yi, he said, I heard from Granny that in this battle, Dao Friend made a great contribution and killed countless enemies. It's truly admirable. The Granny he was talking about was probably Granny Jiao. Regardless of whether it was in the 9 regions or here, under normal circumstances, medical cultivators would not participate in killing. Their skills were all focused on treating people. Therefore, although they had some means to protect themselves, their real fighting strength was generally not that good. Of course, some poison doctors were an exception. Their true fighting strength wasn't that great either, but their killing methods were more subtle and invisible, making it impossible to guard against. Every profession has its specialization. Medical cultivators have their own things. I'm a weapon cultivator, so I should kill enemies. What you and I do is our job. There's no difference between us. The youth immediately had a good impression of Lu Yi. As he healed Lu Yi, he casually chatted with him. After an hour, the young man finished and said, I see that fellow Taoist has a strong physique. This kind of injury isn't a big deal. Rest well for a few days and you'll be fine. Lu Yi got up from the bed and stretched his body. He felt that the soreness had lessened a lot, and his whole body felt comfortable. Junior brother's skills are not bad. The young man smiled and said, Senior brother, if you have any instructions in the future, just give me a shout. I'm at the medical center in the city. Senior brother, please rest first. I'll take my leave first. Lu Yi walked him to the door, then turned around and walked back. He glanced at Dao Shisan and saw that his breathing was normal. He knew that the previous battle had not affected him much. This was the advantage of body cultivators. Even if he had suffered some minor injuries, he would be fully recovered in a few days. How long have I been asleep? Lu Yi asked. Dao 13 thought for a moment, then slowly raised his middle finger at him. Only 1 day. Lu Yi was slightly surprised. He had slept very soundly, mainly due to the exhaustion from the battle. In addition, this was his eldest senior brother's territory, so there was no need for him to be on guard. He sat cross-legged on the bed, closed his eyes, and examined his body. The injuries on his physical body were nothing. His recovery ability was not bad, and with the help of a medical cultivator, he could easily recover. However, Lu Yi quickly noticed that something was wrong. His deity's lake seemed to have expanded a little. This was a pleasant surprise. The problem of the deity's lake had troubled him for a long time. This thing was born by chance when he was in the First Order True Lake Realm. In the history of the 9 continents, there had never been a true Lake Realm cultivator who had given birth to a soul body, so there was no precedent for this. However, Lu Yi had not encountered anything wrong so far. The birth of his divine sense gave him a stronger perception, and he could even activate and construct divine crests. It could be said that there were many benefits. However, his deity's lake was still different from a real deity sea. It could only be considered a weakened version of the deity sea. Lu Yi had naively thought that as his cultivation increased, his deity's lake would slowly expand and eventually evolve into a real deity sea. However, after such a long time, the growth of the deity's lake was extremely limited. Basically, every time he drank the soul-cleansing water, the deity's lake would have a slight change. This led to his divine sense not being strong. Even the blood race Heavenly Venerable, who had just reached the deity sea, had a stronger divine sense than him. This was also a problem that had troubled Lu Yi. However, because he was still in the true lake realm, he did not waste too much energy on this. Unexpectedly, There was a pleasant surprise today. The deity's lake had inexplicably expanded a little. Although it was not much, the change was obvious. The strength of his divine sense was also stronger than before. Was it because he was already in the ninth order true lake realm? Lu Yi was not sure. When a cultivator's cultivation reached his level, they would usually be preparing to break through to the deity sea. However, this was a huge hurdle for any cultivator. If they could cross it, they would be able to see the world, but if they could not, they would be trapped in the true lake realm for the rest of their lives. King Gengwu had been trapped in the ninth order true lake realm for many years. It was not that he did not have enough aptitude, but that breaking through to the deity sea realm did not depend on one's aptitude. A large part of it was also luck. Of course, the supply of resources was indispensable. If one could obtain treasures that nourished the soul, such as soul-cleansing water, it would be easier to break through to the deity sea realm. What Lu Yi did not understand was why the deity's lake had expanded so much this time. When Zhong, after some investigation, he still could not figure out the reason. However, it was indeed time for him to break through to the deity sea realm. This kind of thing could not be done behind closed doors. He had to find someone to ask for advice. In cultivation, there were some things that one needed to persevere on, but there were also some things that one needed to communicate with others. Originally, Lu Yi wanted to find his eldest senior brother to ask about the situation. However, the battle had just ended, and the Jade Blood Holy Land had many trivial matters to attend to. Lu Yi could not find any trace of his eldest senior brother, so he could only wait for a while. For the time being, he could not study the deity's lake. Lu Yi could only comprehend what he had gained from this battle. In this battle, he had maintained the highest level of strength from beginning to end. This was because many of the enemies he had faced were stronger than him. Most of them were deity sea realm blood tribe cultivators. He had no idea how many times he had slashed out with his saber. The experiences he had gained from that life or death battle were not something his usual saber arts could compare to. It could be said that the benefits he had gained from such a battle far surpassed his usual secluded cultivation. What Lu Yi needed to do now was to imprint the various benefits he had gained from this battle into the depths of his soul. He needed to carefully reflect on the various insights he had gained from that life or death battle. The next time he encountered a similar situation, he needed to know what methods he could use to resolve it. Cultivators grew step by step like this. The more life or death situations they experienced, the more powerful their methods would become. Feng Wujiang explained. Divine sense is the manifestation of spiritual energy. In truth, everyone has their own spiritual energy. It's just that the strength is different. Before reaching the deity sea realm, the spiritual energy you use is called mind energy. Junior brother should have experienced this before. Lu Yi nodded. When you activate your power and control the spiritual weapon, you not only consume your own spiritual power, but also the power of mind. Before the spirit sea realm, activating the power of mind for a long time is also a kind of tempering for the spiritual soul. Therefore, as a cultivator's cultivation increases, the power of mind will also grow, and the spiritual soul will become stronger. However, you can't see or touch this kind of thing. Over time, when you reach the ninth order true lake realm, you will have a chance to trigger a qualitative change. That is, your mind energy will transform into divine sense. This will then lead to the birth of a deity sea and the birth of a soul body. Lu Yi was very enlightened. Although he had felt these things before, after all, no one had explained it to him in detail. Now that he heard his eldest senior brother's words, he couldn't help but feel enlightened. Rebirth, the great age of waves before reaching the deity sea realm. Your mind energy is enough to control the power in your body, so you don't need something like divine sense. However, this is the limit when you reach the true lake realm. The next level of power is not something a mere mind energy can control. Therefore, at this stage, cultivators need to turn their mind energy into divine sense. Think of a way to transform the power of the mind into spiritual will. Only with spiritual will one be able to control a higher level of physical strength. At the end of the day, this is a cultivator's own desire. Lu Yi understood Feng Wujiang's meaning. The mind energy, Perhaps two cultivators had the same cultivation and strength, but life and death could be determined in a single exchange. This was because one of them had experienced more similar situations and knew how to effectively kill their opponent. A few days passed in the blink of an eye, until one day, when Lu Yi was in the middle of comprehending, he heard the sound of rushing air. He hurriedly released his divine sense to investigate and found that his eldest senior brother had returned. He had been busy outside and couldn't be seen. Lu Yi hurriedly got up and went to his eldest senior brother's bedchamber to explain his purpose. Feng Wujiang nodded lightly. Junior brother is now at the 9th Order True Lake realm. It is indeed time to break through to the Deity Sea realm. If junior brother has anything he doesn't understand, feel free to ask. Feng Wujiang was very happy to be able to teach Lu Yi cultivation. Lu Yi said, Senior brother, look, I am now at the 9th Order True Lake realm, but I have already formed my soul body and formed my divine sense. However, I feel that I am not a true Deity Sea realm cultivator. What kind of situation is this? Feng Wujiang said, I have never heard of this situation before. But junior brother, do you know why cultivators can only form their divine sense after reaching the 9th Order True Lake realm? Lu Yi naturally shook his head. In the beginning, when one's physical body was not strong enough, the cultivator's subconscious would seek a breakthrough and change. This was how the divine sense and Deity Sea realm were formed. Junior apprentice brother, the reason why you were able to develop your spiritual will at the True Lake stage is because your mental strength is too strong. Coupled with the stimulation of external factors, you were able to develop your spiritual will by chance. That is the protection of your own subconscious. However, you are not a true divine sea stage cultivator because your physical strength has yet to reach the standard. Just your spiritual will alone is not enough. Lu Ye's eyes lit up. So what I need to do now is to accumulate the strength of my physical body. Feng Wujiang nodded. When your physical body's strength reaches the standard, you will have the opportunity to break through to the Deity Sea realm. It was only an opportunity. Chapter 1044. In the 9 continents, there were many 9th Order True Lake realm cultivators. These people had been immersed in this realm for many years, and had long raised their foundation to the extreme, which was the level of their physical body. However, it was still difficult for them to break through to the Divine Sea realm. Therefore, not everyone who had the opportunity to break through to the Divine Sea realm could achieve it. Only a small number of people could complete the transformation of their mental strength and nurture a soul body, turning it into divine sense. Lu Yi had taken this step a long time ago, but it was a coincidence. It was the protection of his subconscious mind under the stimulation of external forces. Because his physical strength was still at the True Lake realm, his divine sense was enough to control it. Therefore, his divine sense had not grown much. According to eldest senior brother, only when the foundation of his physical body was raised to the point where his divine sense could no longer control it, would his subconscious mind have the need to change. At that time, it would be the opportunity to break through to the Divine Sea realm. Therefore, what Lu Yi needed to do now was very simple. He still only needed to cultivate and constantly strengthen his physical body. Of course, while improving your physical strength, you also need to temper your mind. Only by progressing together can you achieve the best results. However, junior brother, your situation is special. Others have shackles when breaking through to the Divine Sea realm, but you should succeed naturally. After all, you have already nurtured a soul body, so there are no barriers. As long as you accumulate enough strength, you will naturally break through. How do I temper my mind? Lu Yi asked humbly. Feng Wujiang smiled slightly. For ordinary True Lake realm cultivators, the best way to temper their mind is through visualization. Visualization? Yes. When cultivating, visualize the structure of some objects in your mind and try to recreate them as completely as possible. At first, visualize some simple things, but after you become proficient, it will increase in difficulty. In this way, the visualization process will consume your mental strength. When your mind is tired, you will slowly recover. Repeat the process of consumption and recovery and your mind will be tempered. Feng Wujiang looked at Lu Yi and continued. Generally, cultivators from large sects would begin preparing for this when they reached the 7th order True Lake realm, or even earlier, in order to lay down a good foundation. Every sect has its own visualization method, each with its own advantages and disadvantages. This is also a part of the heritage of each sect, and cannot be lumped together. Junior brother, if you were in the 9 continents, the sect master would have taught you this. Lu Yi nodded. In this regard, his situation was a little difficult to predict. The main reason was that his cultivation speed was a little too fast. He had never heard of such a thing before. It was probably because the sect leader and second senior sister felt that his cultivation was too low and temporarily did not need to use it, so they did not tell him about it to avoid disturbing his state of mind. In the end, when he could use it, he was captured by that woman, Yu Daiwei, and then came to the blood-refining realm. If he hadn't heard eldest senior brother mention it today, Lu Yi really wouldn't have known about such a secret technique. De Shixiang's tone changed. Of course, that's for normal True Lake stage cultivators. Junior already has spiritual will, so it's much simpler. You just have to constantly expend your spiritual will and slowly recover it. Can I borrow some recovery items? Lu Yi asked. Like soul-cleansing water? If that was the case, then the effect of his spiritual force refinement would be countless times better than that of ordinary people. You'd better not. Feng Wujiang shook his head. This period of time is very crucial for you. Any impulsive actions are not encouraged. It's best to let nature take its course. There's still a year left, so I believe you can do it. A year? Lu Yi didn't understand. What will happen after a year? All right. Feng Wujiang smiled. Junior brother, you're not thinking of staying here forever, are you? After a year, the Tianji pillar will be activated. All right. Lu Ye's expression brightened. Senior brother, you mean? Feng Wujiang said. Your situation is different from ours. We're all people who have reached the end of the road on the path of cultivation. Jiuzhou's Tianji sent us here for 2 reasons. On one hand, it wants us to think of a way to save the human race here and plan for the future of the human race. On the other hand, it's probably because it's afraid of us stirring up trouble in Jiuzhou. Over the years, those who were qualified to be sent to the blood-refining realm by Jiuzhou's Tianji were the top experts of each era. They've reached the end of the road on the path of cultivation and can't go any further. If such people continue to stay in Jiuzhou, they'll become restless factors. Therefore, Jiuzhou's Tianji sent them here to let them shine. Lu Yi was the first true lake stage cultivator to be sent here, providing you with the latest chapter of Great God Momo's The Great Sage of Human Tao. Chapter 1044, Great Sage Beankard Concubine, The Great Sage of Human Tao. Moreover, they were sent here as reinforcements. It was because of his arrival that the Blood Jade Sacred Land was able to resist the Blood Race Army's encirclement. I can't be sure, but I think Junior brother has a high chance of returning to Jiuzhou. Senior brother, you and those old seniors can't go back? Lu Yi asked. Feng Wujiang shook his head. I tried when the Tianji pillar was activated, but it didn't work. Lu Yi calmed himself down and said, I understand. He had to reach the Divine Sea within a year and return to Jiuzhou. This was what he had to do next. Lu Yi was very confident in this. Even though his path of cultivation had been filled with danger, at the very least, he hadn't encountered too many obstacles on his path of improvement, and he'd accumulated an indomitable mentality, an imposing aura since a long time ago. He believed that this time would be no exception. After saying goodbye to Feng Wujiang, Lu Yi didn't rush to cultivate. Instead, he brought Dao 13 down the holy mountain and toward the holy island. A year was still a long time, so there was no need to rush. Moreover, he had just recovered from his injuries, so it wasn't good for him to immediately enter a state of cultivation. The entire holy island was a massive gathering place for the human race. Regardless of whether they were mortal or cultivators, cultivators and mortals lived together in harmony. Perhaps it was because they had just repelled the Blood Tribe army, but the holy island was in a state of jubilation. The atmosphere was relaxed, and there were lanterns and streamers everywhere. The streets were crowded with people, and many shops stood on both sides of the street. It was a bustling scene. Lu Yi rarely saw such a scene. Perhaps some of the cities in Jiuzhou where mortals gathered were like this. But since he embarked on the path of cultivation, he rarely came into contact with a large number of mortals. So he couldn't help but feel a sense of novelty. As Lu Yi walked and looked, he came face to face with a Tonghulu seller. The seller opened his mouth and shouted. The straw target he was shooting at was filled with a bunch of crystal-clear Tonghulu. Lu Yi stopped the seller and asked for the price. Just as he was about to buy 2 to try, he suddenly remembered that he didn't have any currency here. He didn't have any spirit stones or spirit pills either. He had already used up all his cultivation resources when he broke through to the True Lake Realm 8th Order. Not far away, the tofu seller said, "Give him 2 Tonghulu sticks, I'll pay." Lu Yi turned his head and the corner of his eyes twitched. A moment later, Lu Yi and Dao 13 each held a Tonghulu stick and stood beside the tofu seller. Lu Yi still couldn't believe his eyes. "Senior, I almost didn't recognize you in your clothes." "Senior?" Yuji raised her hand and knocked his head. "Speak properly." "Senior." Lu Yi also knew that he had misspoken, mainly because he didn't expect Yuji to be here and dressed like this. Previously, Yuji was always covered in a thin veil, and her graceful figure was faintly discernible, causing one's blood to boil. But now, she was wearing coarse clothes, with a square handkerchief on her head, and her sleeves reaching her elbows. She looked exactly like a peasant woman. "Senior, what are you doing?" Lu Yi was really puzzled. "Selling tofu." Yuji replied matter-of-factly, "I have to make a living." Lu Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The dignified 7th-generation sect leader of the 10,000 Dharma sect in Lei Province, Lai Feng, came to the blood-refining realm to sell tofu. If this was seen by the disciples of the 10,000 Dharma sect, how could they endure it? Moreover, why would a senior expert like Yuji need ordinary things to make a living? Lu Yi could see that she was playing life. He could only sigh that the actions of experts were always unpredictable. "I can't sell tofu?" Yuji glanced at him. "You can sell it. You can sell it." How could Lu Yi dare to say no? "When I was young, I sold tofu to make a living. Later, I was chosen by a cultivator of the 10,000 Dharma sect, and was accepted as a disciple. Now, I'm just resuming my old business. What's there to fuss about?" Yuji said and pointed across the street. "Look at that old man over there." Lu Yi looked in the direction she was pointing, and saw an old man sunbathing at the entrance of a small shop. A few children gathered around him, and poked his nose with green foxtails. He didn't look up and only occasionally waved them away, causing the children to snicker. There was a cloth banner beside the old man. On it, there was a large and eye-catching calculate character. "He looks a little familiar," said Lu Yi. But then she thought about it. "Providing you with the great god Momos, the great sage of human Tao." Translator. Naebo Studio Beankerd Girl. The fastest to update the latest chapter. Was he one of the 70 or so old seniors? Is he telling someone's fortune? Lu Yi was speechless. "It's just a hobby." Yuji smiled. "People like us can't die even if we die, and life is boring, so we can only find some entertainment for ourselves." "Senior, what are you saying?" Lu Yi did not know how to pick it up, but perhaps it was the truth. The old seniors still had lifespan, but there was no road ahead. For any cultivator who pursued a higher realm all their life, this was a kind of torture. If there was really no road ahead, then it was fine. The key was that each of them could clearly feel that there was a road ahead, but they could not find it. So for Jiuzhou's Tianji to send them to this blood-refining world, there was no complaint. They didn't have any complaints. At the very least, they had found what they wanted to do here. It wasn't like back in the 9 provinces, where they still had to put on airs as seniors and rely on their own identities. "Is it good?" Yuji suddenly asked. Lu Yi handed over the half-eaten candied haws. "Try it?" Yuji rolled her eyes. "Hurry up and eat. When you're done, help me shout." Lu Yi almost choked to death and swallowed the candied haws with great difficulty. "Senior, you're a bit too much. 2 skewers of candied haws are only worth a little. I'll pay you back later." "Cut the crap." A moment later, A crisp shout sounded from the tofu stall, selling tofu, fresh and tender tofu. To see the latest update of the Great Sage of Human Tao, providing you with the Great God Momos, the Great Sage of Human Tao. Chapter 1044. The Great Sage of Human Tao Beancurd Girl. _ Chapter 1045. After helping the tofu concubine sell tofu for 2 days, Lu Yi returned to the holy mountain. He opened the door to his room, which was filled with blood crystals of different sizes. Obviously, senior brother had ordered someone to deliver them. Blood crystals came from the blood race. During this battle, the human race had not collected many blood crystals. This was because most of the invading blood race cultivators had been killed outside the defensive line, and their corpses had fallen into the Divine Gate Ocean. How could they collect any blood crystals? These blood crystals were all collected from the previous battles, so there was a huge amount of them. Lu Yi smiled knowingly, walked into his room and sat down cross-legged. Activating the power of the talent tree, invisible roots spread out and pierced into the blood crystals nearby, swallowing them up and turning them into Bai Shun's foundation. 7. The cultivation of the true lake realm was the refinement of the cultivator's spirit energy. Every breakthrough in the realm was a transformation of one's spirit energy. The 9th order true lake realm was the 9th transformation of spirit energy. In theory, every small difference in the true lake realm would double the quality and quantity of one's spirit energy. Of course, in reality, the difference was not that big, but it was undeniable that every breakthrough in the true lake realm would greatly increase a cultivator's strength. This was also the reason why the higher the cultivation of the earth cultivator, the harder it was to kill enemies of a higher realm. Those elite geniuses in the spirit stream realm and cloud river realm might not be able to do so in the true lake realm. Lu Yi was an exception. Yang Kai had developed his divine sense when he was just a first-order true lake realm cultivator, and with his divine sense, he could often kill enemies several minor realms above him. When he was just a third-order true lake realm cultivator, he had jumped several minor realms to kill Ben Shu in Dark Moon Forest. Because of this, Li Tai Bai's name spread throughout the Dark Moon Forest overnight. He was even recognized by Lin Yu as a person who could compete with Lu Yi of the Blue Blood Sect. Unfortunately, the heavens were jealous of talents. The rising star quickly met with misfortune, leaving Lin Mu helpless. Of course, even without his divine sense, Lu Yi could kill enemies of a higher realm. The main reason was that his spirit energy was too pure. Since the beginning of his cultivation, he had the heavenly stone tree with him. It could be said that his spirit energy did not have the slightest impurity. This was something that no other cultivator could compare to. Cultivators couldn't avoid taking medicinal pills during their cultivation. Even if earth cultivation had a unique method to neutralize medicinal pills, the effect couldn't compare to the merciless burning of the talent tree. His foundation in the purity of his spiritual power was not as good as Lu Ye's. After the first transformation, second transformation, second transformation, second transformation, until the 9th transformation, the gap slowly widened. At the same cultivation level, Lu Yi would always be able to bring out a higher level of strength. Now that he was a true lake 9th order cultivator, there was no way for him to improve the purity of his spirit energy. All he could do was increase his spirit energy reserves and strengthen his physique. According to eldest senior apprentice brother, it was to accumulate the strength of one's physical body to the point where it was difficult for one's mind to control it. Only then would one's subconscious have the desire to change, and that would be the opportunity to ascend to the divine sea. Cultivating with the help of the talent tree was not a big deal. All he had to do was to maintain it. Of course, this process would also consume his mental strength. This was a good thing for him, because his eldest senior brother had said that he needed to temper his mind while improving his physical strength. Only by doing so would he be able to achieve the best results. Lu Yi did as told. Lu Yi diverted a bit of his attention to continue activating the power of the talent tree. Then, he activated his divine sense to construct the soul manipulation divine rune. This was his advantage. Other cultivators at this stage needed to rely on various visualization methods to consume their mental strength. Not only was it troublesome, but the efficiency was also not high. However, he did not need any visualization methods at all. He only needed to construct the divine rune to continuously consume his divine sense. Of course, this kind of construction was done out of thin air. There was no one to control, nor was there any hope of controlling it. But soon, Lu Yi discovered a problem. If he did this, wouldn't his mental strength become stronger and stronger? The stronger his mental strength, the stronger his divine sense would be, and he would be able to control the strength of his physical body more easily. Even if he didn't, when would he reach the point where his physical body would reach a certain level, and his subconscious would want to change? Lu Yi stopped what he was doing and pondered quietly. Although his physical body and divine sense were both growing, the growth of his physical body was definitely much faster than his divine sense. After all, from the First Order True Lake realm until now, his divine pond had not changed much. The improvement of his divine sense was completely dependent on swallowing soul-cleansing water. It could be seen that increasing the strength of his divine sense was still very difficult. A few days ago, his divine pond had expanded a little. It was probably the result of accumulation over a long period of time. Therefore, this cultivation method was not a problem. As long as his physical body improved quickly enough, there would be an opportunity. It could even be said that because he already had his divine sense, he could accumulate a greater foundation in the True Lake realm. Other True Lake realm cultivators did not have such an advantage. If other True Lake realm cultivators had an opportunity to break through to the Divine Sea realm, after accumulating a certain amount of foundation, then the foundation he needed to accumulate was several times, or even 10 times, that of an ordinary True Lake realm cultivator. Or even more. They were both building houses. Other Divine Sea realm cultivators only had a thin layer of foundation, but he had several layers. In this way, when he truly broke through to the Divine Sea realm, the strength he could display would naturally be stronger than an ordinary Divine Sea realm cultivator. Of course, Lu Yi could predict that because of his uniqueness, the difficulty of breaking through to the Divine Sea realm this time was not something an ordinary person could compare to. He had already mentally prepared himself. 1 year was enough. Probably soul manipulation divine runes continued to be constructed. When he felt a little tired, Lu Yi stopped his breathing and sat quietly, allowing the strength of his divine sense to slowly recover. This process could be seen directly. The specific manifestation could be seen above the God's pool. The God's pool was not empty, but filled with water. This water was the condensation of the divine sense. If the divine sense was used too much, the water in the God's pool would decrease. If the divine sense was full, the God's pool would also be full. The recovery of the divine sense was very troublesome. There were no miraculous pills to rely on, especially for someone like Lu Yi, who did not have a strong divine sense. In the past, if he used too much of his divine sense, he would directly use the soul-cleansing water to recover it easily. But now it was not possible. De Shixiang said that at this critical juncture, any actions that spoil things through excessive enthusiasm were not advisable. Therefore, Lu Yi could only allow his divine sense to slowly recover. This cycle repeated. In the room, Lu Yi sat cross-legged. The power of his talent tree continued to be activated. Pieces of blood crystals turned into powder. When the God's pool was full, he would construct the soul manipulation divine runes. When the God's pool was dry, he would rest and wait. He was not always in closed-door cultivation, so he did not have the temperament to do so. After all, he was still young and full of energy. It was impossible for him to sit still like the old seniors, who had cultivated for hundreds of years. Every once in a while, he would go down the mountain for a walk. He would go to the tofu concubine's place to eat some tofu pudding, go to the fortune-telling old seniors to calculate his future, play a few rounds of chess with some old seniors, and even plant rice with Meng Jie in the fields. It was hard to imagine the Vitality sect's third-generation sect master, wearing a straw hat with his trousers rolled up, and busying himself in the fields. However, Lu Yi was slowly getting used to the temperament of these old seniors. Their cultivation bases had already reached perfection, and they did not need to cultivate at all. They just needed to find something to pass the time. It could not be said that they were playing in the mortal world. Being part of the mortal world was their favorite thing to do. Of course, not all of the old seniors were like that. Some of them maintained the style of an otherworldly expert and lived in remote and uninhabited places. He did not purposely look for these old seniors. The main reason was that there were dozens of them scattered around the Holy Island. He could always meet one or two of them when he was wandering around. He was the Divine Lord's junior brother, and he had made great contributions in the battle against the Blood Race army. Naturally, the old seniors saw him in a new light and were happy to interact with him. Nobody taught him anything about cultivation. With the old seniors' eyesight, how could they not see that he was now at the critical moment of breaking through to the Divine Sea realm? It was not good to teach him anything at this time, because the more they taught, the more chaotic it would be. They knew that the Divine Lord must have given them instructions on this matter. The Divine Lord might not be as old as them, but cultivation did not depend on age. Since the Divine Lord had given them instructions, there was no need for them to overstep their boundaries. Lu Yi would not take the initiative to ask them for advice. He had his own goal now, and he only needed to take one step at a time toward it. It was the most comforting to have no intersections of utilitarian interests. If it were in the 9 states, each of these old seniors would be famous in the 9 states. If they really showed up, they would be surrounded by a large group of disciples and grand disciples. They would not have such leisure time. Immortal Wood's miracle. For more than half a year, Lu Yi had interacted with almost all of the old seniors. He did not know which of these people were from the Haotian Alliance, and which were from the Myriad Devil Ridge. He did not even know the names of many of them. He only knew the names of a limited number of people. In such an environment, it was meaningless to distinguish between the Haotian Alliance and the Myriad Devil Ridge. However, when they interacted with each other in private, the old seniors would still be attacked and exposed. Who knew what they were talking about? They were not good people. They told Lu Yi to be careful. They said that someone had a vicious heart, and told Lu Yi to take a detour. It seemed to be their greatest pleasure to badmouth the people they looked down on in front of Lu Yi. They did not have this opportunity in the past, but now they did. Every time this happened, Lu Yi would nod his head in agreement. He looked like he was worth teaching. This made the old seniors feel that Lu Yi was a talent with great potential. But recently, Lu Yi discovered that the number of old seniors on the Holy Island had decreased for some reason. Many times, he couldn't even find the old seniors in those fixed places. Even the old seniors had disappeared. Eldest senior brother was nowhere to be seen. Lu Yi and Dao Shisan were squatting beside Tofu Concubine's tofu stall. They were eating tofu pudding while Han Hu asked, "Senior, where did my eldest senior brother go?" Yu Ji greeted the customers while saying without turning her head, "He went to look for blood crystals for you." Huh? Lu Yi was stunned. The Sacred Lord said that your cultivation consumed a lot of blood crystals. The blood crystals stored might not be able to keep up with your consumption. Therefore, he brought a group of people out to sea to search for blood crystals. She did not hide it, mainly because there was no need to. Chapter 1046. Lu Yi's heart warmed. Yu Ji was curious. How can you use blood crystals to cultivate? My innate talent? Let me see. Yu Ji's curiosity grew. Lu Yi took out a blood crystal and threw it into her mouth, crunching as she chewed. The blood crystal was dark red, and the tofu pudding was snow white. The strong visual contrast made even someone like Yu Ji couldn't help but look away, muttering, "Little monster." Of course, he didn't have the intention to investigate. Who didn't have their own secrets? It could be said that each of the seniors sent to Blood Refining World by Heaven Ji had their own secrets. Cultivation continued. The blood crystals in the room had been replenished many times, all sent by eldest senior brother himself. However, Lu Yi could perceive that the blood crystals sent by eldest senior brother were getting fewer and fewer each time. Even if the Holy Land had a blood crystal reserve, there was always a limit. The Holy Land had only been collecting blood crystals for a few decades. Lu Yi felt a little bloated. It wasn't a psychological bloat, but a genuine bloat. There was no change in his figure, but the spiritual power in his body had accumulated over this period of cultivation, becoming more and more vigorous. Judging from the fluctuations of his spirit energy alone, at this moment, his spirit energy was no less than the spirit sea realm. But in fact, he hadn't broken through to the spirit sea realm because his divine sense was strong enough to control the power in his body. His subconscious hadn't reached the point where he wanted to change. The biggest obstacle to breaking through to the spirit sea realm had come, which Lu Yi had expected. A first-order true lake realm cultivator had developed a divine sense, and since then enjoyed the benefits of the spirit sea realm. But there was no free lunch in this world. Logically speaking, it was impossible for a true lake realm cultivator to accumulate such a huge amount of spirit energy. To this extent, an ordinary true lake realm cultivator would either have an opportunity to break through to the spirit sea realm and was making a final effort to do so, or because their mental strength was insufficient, it was difficult for them to control the accumulated spirit energy in their body. But Lu Yi was an exception. He could continue to accumulate spirit energy like this, causing the foundation of his body to become stronger and stronger. After more than a month, the spirit energy accumulated in Lu Yi's body became denser and denser. His spirit acupoints were constantly agitated. This was the pressure brought about by the massive amount of spirit energy in his body. Faintly, he felt like he had touched that opportunity. Lu Yi was overjoyed. At this critical juncture, he didn't run around, but instead focused on cultivation. A few days later, the room's restriction was suddenly triggered. Lu Yi raised his hand to open the restriction. An eldest senior brother entered. Looking at Lu Yi's condition, Feng Wujiang asked with concern, "How's your cultivation?" "It should be soon." Feng Wujiang nodded. He shook his bags of holding, causing blood crystals to appear on the ground, as well as some medicinal pills and spirit stones. "Then cultivate well. There's still time, so don't worry." He could also see what kind of difficulties Lu Yi was facing now, but there was nothing he could do to help. He could only let Lu Yi do whatever he wanted. "Eldest senior brother, there's no need to look for more blood crystals." During this period of time, eldest senior brother had been bringing back fewer and fewer blood crystals. This time, he had even brought back some pills and spirit stones. From this, it could be seen that the Holy Land did not have many resources left. Furthermore, he felt uneasy that his eldest senior brother had to lead a group of old seniors to collect the blood crystals. Feng Wujiang looked at him in confusion. "Do you have enough resources?" Lu Yi shook his head. "I don't, but I have a good place to go." "Don't worry, senior brother." Feng Wujiang pondered for a moment, then nodded. "Then be careful. If you need anything, you must tell me." "All right. Got it," Lu Yi replied. Eldest senior brother did not bring many resources this time. Lu Yi spent less than 10 days to devour all of them. There were no more cultivation resources available, but Lu Yi could vaguely grasp the opportunity to make a breakthrough. The main reason was that after such a long period of cultivation, the foundation of his physical body had accumulated to an extremely terrifying level. Even though he had already developed a divine sense, he still faintly felt that he could not control it. Just a little more. Providing you with the latest chapter of Great God Momo's The Great Sage of Human Tao. Translator, Transin Editor, Transin into the Blood Sea for free reading. The fastest to update the latest chapter. He stood up, pushed open the door and rushed out. Soon he arrived at the edge of the Holy Island. Looking at the Blood Sea in front of him, he did not hesitate and dove in. This was the good place he told his eldest senior brother to go. For other human cultivators, there were no other cultivation resources in the blood refining realm other than the heaven and earth spirit chi. But that was not the case for him. The blood rivers that could be seen everywhere were the largest cultivation resources. Of course, there was a price to pay for using the blood rivers to cultivate. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Lu Yi was unwilling to take this step. Because once he took this step, it meant that it was the final sprint. He had to reach the divine sea before the talent tree ran out of fuel. Otherwise, no one would be able to withstand the strangeness of the blood sea. The moment he disappeared, figures flew from all around the holy island. They were the old seniors. In the blink of an eye, dozens of people had gathered. To be able to gather so quickly, they were obviously paying attention to his movements. Holy Lord, what is this junior brother of yours doing? He dares to enter the blood sea. An old man with white hair and a youthful face asked. The others also looked curious. Of course, they didn't think that Lu Yi would take things too hard. Since Lu Yi dared to take the initiative to enter the blood sea, it meant that he had the ability to resist the erosion of the blood sea. Although they also had the same ability, each of their cultivations had reached a high level. How could Lu Yi compare? Moreover, even they did not want to stay in the blood sea for too long. It consumed too much spirit qi. Feng Wujiang shook his head and did not say anything. He looked faintly worried. Holy Lord, don't panic. Yu Ji said. Since he can use the blood crystals to cultivate, the blood sea probably can't do anything to him. Holy Lord, you might not know, but he eats the blood crystals. The old seniors' eyes twitched. This was the first time they had heard of this. The old seniors were gathered here, but they couldn't sense what was going on below the blood sea. The blood sea's suppression of spiritual sense was too strong. Even people like them couldn't probe too deep. In the depths of the blood sea, Lu Yi relaxed his body and sank all the way until he reached the bottom of the sea. There was an indescribable pressure pressing down on him from all directions. It made him uncomfortable and increased the burden on his body. Lu Yi suddenly realized that this was a good place to break through to the divine sea. The pressure from the enormous spirit qi in his body, and the pressure from the blood sea outside his body. Under these two conditions, the opportunity in the unseen world became much clearer. He immediately activated the talent tree's power, and devoured the surging power in the blood sea around him. On the talent tree, large patches of gray mist burned and rose. It was much more active than devouring the blood crystals. He did not know if he could successfully break through to the divine sea this time. If not, he could only wait until he returned to the 9 states. Of course, the prerequisite was that he could return to the 9 states. Eldest senior brother's previous words were only inferences. There was no clear evidence that he could definitely use the Pillar of Heaven's secrets to teleport. Therefore, it was possible that he could not return. If that was the case, then there was nothing he could do. He could only say that Heaven's secrets was unreliable. However, based on his interactions with Heaven's secrets so far, Heaven's secrets would not abandon him after exiling him to the blood refinement realm. His situation was not the same as those old seniors. His body soon turned into a whirlpool. Seawater surged in from all directions. Time passed. The foundation of his body continued to strengthen. The feeling of his spirit sense being unable to control his body slowly became clearer. Lu Yi suddenly entered an extremely strange state. It was as if his mind was drifting away, silently watching his breakthrough as a bystander. This feeling was extremely strange. Lu Yi could not tell if it was good or bad. However, there was not much he could do now. Since he decided to break through to the divine sea, he was destined to walk down this path. There was no turning back. He would either be badly battered or succeed. Although his mind was drifting away, Lu Yi could still sense his body. He could clearly feel that his body was getting stronger and stronger. Providing you with the latest chapter of Great God Momo's Human Tao Great Sage, Chapter 1046. Divine Sea Enter the Blood Sea for free reading. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. As his body expanded, his spirit energy fluctuations became extremely unstable. Sometimes it was as fierce as the tide, and sometimes it was as still as the sea. This was a clear sign that it was difficult to control his body's strength. The opportunity for a breakthrough was very clear. In his mind, the deity's lake seemed to have a life of its own, constantly expanding and contracting. However, he could not take that step. Lu Yi had expected that it would be very difficult for him to break through to the divine sea, because he had already developed spirit sense. However, he did not expect it to be this difficult. Now he was facing a predicament, and that was whether or not he could grasp that trace of opportunity before his physical body couldn't endure it any longer. He felt that he was just a little bit off. However, in life, this little bit of difference was often the difference between heaven and earth. He could only continuously devour the energy in the blood sea and push himself to his limit. Fortunately, his body was strong enough. If it was an ordinary weapon cultivator, the accumulated foundation in his body would have already caused his body to explode. Even so, tiny cracks had appeared on the surface of his skin. It was as if a mirror had been shattered, and blood was flowing out from those tiny cracks. As the opportunity for a breakthrough became clearer, the deity's lake expanded and contracted more frequently. At this point, it was truly the final step. If he succeeded, everything would be fine. If he failed, everything would be over. However, Lu Ye's mood was unprecedentedly calm. He was not nervous at all. He was very clear that he had already done everything he could. Cultivation was nothing more than doing one's best and leaving the rest to fate. At this critical juncture, Lu Ye suddenly felt something strange. It was as if there was some light flashing in front of him. Even though his eyes were closed, he could still feel the obvious light. He slowly opened his eyes and immediately saw a strange scene. In the dark red blood water, a ball of golden light was spinning towards him. It was obviously attracted by the whirlpool beside him. To view the latest chapter of Human Tao Great Sage, please enter in your browser. Providing you with the latest chapter of Great God Momo's Human Tao Great Sage, Chapter 1046, Divine Sea. Enter the Blood Sea for free reading. Chapter 1047. The moment he saw the golden light, Lu Yi couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't expect there to be such an abnormal thing under the blood sea. However, he quickly realized what it was. This was obviously the source of the blood kindred's holy seed. Lan Qiyu had told him before that the reason she became a holy seed was because she caught a ball of golden light under the blood pool. Then, due to fate, she turned from a human into a blood breed. She was even the holy seed of the blood breed. When Lan Qiyu told him about this matter, Lu Yi already had some suspicions. Perhaps there were no blood kindred in this world. Was it the strangeness of the blood pool that caused the birth of the blood kindred's holy seed? Then the blood kindred was born. Just like on the Wuxia continent, there were no corpse kindred in the first place. All the corpse kindred were transformed by humans. However, this was only a suspicion. There was no concrete evidence. Lu Yi didn't want to investigate the cause of the blood kindred's birth. It had nothing to do with him. However, he never expected that he would encounter such a golden light in the blood sea. There was no way to find out where the golden light originally was. During this time, Lu Yi had been urging the power of the talent tree to devour everything. His body had turned into a vortex. The golden light was obviously attracted by the flow of blood around him. From the golden light, Lu Yi could feel an extremely rich and surging power, something that the surrounding blood water simply could not compare to. It was like a bright moon suddenly blooming in a swarm of fireflies. And this was exactly what Lu Yi needed now. Without hesitation, Lu Yi reached out to grab the golden light and held it in his palm. Lu Yi felt like he had grabbed a soldering iron. He felt a sharp pain in his palm, but he didn't let go. The golden light seemed to have a mind of its own. It directly drilled into Lu Ye's palm and disappeared. Lu Ye's body shook. He hurriedly activated his divine sense to check his body. His entire body suddenly emitted a bright light. The golden light enveloped him, and the veins on his skin bulged. Clearly, there was a golden light flowing through them. With this golden light, Lan Qiyu turned from a human into a blood kindred's holy seed. Lu Yi wasn't worried about such a change because he had the talent tree. It could burn all external energy that was harmful to him and leave behind energy that was useful to him. As expected, the moment the golden light entered his body, his tree began to sway. This was something that had never happened before. What made Lu Yi even more surprised was that the talent tree was emitting smoke. It was really smoking. In the past, no matter what he refined, even if it was something poisonous, the talent tree would only emit a gray mist at most. But this time, the talent tree was smoking, and even the burning leaves on the talent tree were flickering. Lu Yi came to a realization. Although this ball of golden light contained an extremely vast amount of power, it also contained many impurities, or rather, many things that were harmful to him. As the talent tree emitted smoke, Lu Yi could clearly sense that the fuel stored in the talent tree was decreasing rapidly. Since the talent tree completed its transformation, Lu Yi could roughly sense the situation of the fuel storage. Now, the fuel in the talent tree basically came from the sword instrument sect's secret realm. There, Lu Yi had urged the talent tree to devour the fire of the earth lung for 2 months, which directly caused the sword instrument sect's secret realm to collapse. The harvest was so huge that it was difficult to estimate. After such a long time, even if he had stayed in the Blood Sea all this time, the talent tree still had about half of its fuel left. But now, the fuel consumption had suddenly increased. At this rate, the fuel would be completely consumed in less than 5 days. By then, the talent tree would no longer have the ability to burn impurities. Lu Yi wouldn't be able to stay in the Blood Sea safely, and it would even affect his future cultivation. However, Lu Yi didn't have the time to pay attention to the talent tree. As the golden light ball entered his body, all kinds of mysteries suddenly exploded in his mind. Lu Yi didn't even know where these mysteries came from. They seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He quickly understood that these mysteries came from the golden light ball. It wasn't just a ball of surging energy, but also a unique inheritance. An inheritance that belonged to the blood kindred. The blood kindred's blood fetus was born from the blood river. They didn't have parents to take care of them, nor did they have elders to teach them. However, they were born knowing how to cultivate and how to perform all kinds of blood Dao secret techniques. This bloodline inheritance was engraved in their bones. The blood flowing in the blood river was the blood kindred's good teacher. The essence of the golden light ball was also a drop of blood. It contained many exquisite inheritances that were far from being comparable to the ordinary blood in the blood river. The enormous amount of information seemed to make his mind explode. The rich and surging energy flowed through his body, increasing the burden on his physical body. Lu Yi felt like he was going to die. He wished he could faint immediately. He couldn't understand how Lan Qiyue had persevered. However, he didn't know that when Lan Qiyue devoured the golden light ball, her entire body was rapidly transforming in the direction of the blood kindred's holy seed. For the blood kindred, this bloodline inheritance was branded in the depths of her blood. As her cultivation increased, it would awaken little by little. Therefore, although Lan Qiyue's situation was critical at that time, as long as she could survive the initial stage, she would be fine. He was different. With the talent tree burning all the impurities and things that were harmful to him, the golden light ball couldn't transform him into the blood kindred's holy seed. He still maintained the foundation of a human. However, the burning of the talent tree still preserved things that were useful to him, such as the bloodline inheritance hidden in the golden light ball. The things that Lan Qiyue needed to spend a lifetime to slowly awaken all exploded when it came to him. This kind of mental impact wasn't something an ordinary person could endure. Even a divine sea realm cultivator would have their divine sense destroyed and their spirit sea shattered in an instant. The feedback to Lu Ye's situation was even more intuitive. The illusory images of the gold and silver flood dragons drifting around the divine pool turned into specks of light and disappeared. The double dragon sea protection was a method that the gold and silver flood dragons of the War Merit Pavilion bestowed upon Lu Yi to protect his divine soul. It had been used repeatedly against divine sea realm cultivators. Today, it was completely broken, and there was no possibility of recovery. The impact that was hard to see with the naked eye crashed into Lu Ye's divine pool. Cracks appeared on the divine pool's barrier. In the past, even if it was attacked by a divine sea realm cultivator's divine sense, the water in the divine pool would remain calm because of the soul pagoda's suppression. But this time, even with the soul pagoda, the water in the divine pool was still undulating. Lu Yi had a splitting headache. The huge influx of information allowed him to constantly gain insights. However, whether it was his body or his divine soul, they were all suffering. It was extremely painful. Time seemed to pass extremely slowly. Lu Yi didn't know how much time had passed. He didn't even know if he was alive or dead. Until a certain moment, all the suffering suddenly disappeared. It was as if everything he had just experienced was just an illusion. Lu Yi couldn't help but shake his head. He felt as if his entire brain was shaking. He was still alive. This was a good thing. He hurriedly checked his body. An even greater surprise was imprinted in his heart. Unknowingly, he had successfully reached the Divine Sea realm. The originally small divine pool had obviously expanded a lot. It could already be called a divine sea. However, because he had used up too much of his divine sense, the seawater was as thin as mist. This caused his energy to be somewhat lacking. However, his body's vitality was limitless, because his physical strength had been accumulating for more than half a year. The most intuitive manifestation was that the surging spirit chi in his body had become as thick as a paste. In fact, after his 9th revolution spirit chi and his breakthrough to the 9th order true lake realm, the spirit chi in his body had already shown signs of transforming in this direction. But it was just a trend. During this time, no matter how much Lu Yi accumulated his spirit chi, it only increased in quantity, not in quality. The breakthrough to the Divine Sea realm had undoubtedly caused his spirit chi to break through to a new height. His divine sense was weak, but his physical body was strong. This caused Lu Yi to feel as if he couldn't control himself. It was like a 3-year-old child wanting to lift a big hammer. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't lift it. The recovery speed of his spiritual energy suddenly accelerated. Another hour passed, and Lu Yi rose to his feet. Channeling his spiritual energy, he leaped into the air and flew up. The fuel for his talent tree was too great. Lu Yi naturally didn't want to stay in the Blood Sea for long. He had no choice but to lack cultivation resources before. But now that he had reached the Divine Sea realm, he naturally wanted to leave as soon as possible. Several thousand meters up, he left the Blood Sea realm in a moment. Rushing out of the Blood Sea and standing in mid-air, bathed in the sunlight, Lu Yi couldn't help but have the illusion that he had been reborn. From now on, he was a member of the Divine Sea realm. Congratulations, junior brother, for reaching the Divine Sea realm. Suddenly, a voice called out from the side. He wanted to raise his hand, but his arm felt as heavy as a mountain. He wanted to get up, but there seemed to be a star pressing down on his back. Lu Yi was helpless. He could only continue to sit cross-legged at the bottom of the sea, silently cultivate, and wait for his divine sense to slowly recover. He didn't need to fully recover, but at the very least, he wanted to be able to control his body. It had to be said that after reaching the Divine Sea realm, the recovery speed of his divine sense had become much faster. The thin sea of fog became denser, and then began to condense into a liquid form. An hour later, Lu Yi could move his arm. Awkwardly, he took out a drop of soul-cleansing water from his storage space and swallowed it. Lu Yi turned his head and saw Feng Wujiang standing on the edge of the Blood Sea, smiling at him. He had been waiting here. For others, even if they failed to reach the Divine Sea realm, it was nothing more than cutting off their future. If they were lucky enough, they could make a comeback in the future. However, Lu Yi had broken through under the Blood Sea, which was extremely dangerous. Feng Wujiang couldn't help but worry about him. He had waited here for many days. Now that he finally saw Lu Yi return safely and successfully breaking through, he was naturally happy. He loved reading books. Feeling the care and concern of his eldest senior brother, Lu Yi turned around and bowed solemnly. "I've made senior brother worry." Feng Wujiang smiled slightly. "Are you ready?" "What?" Lu Yi was puzzled. "Then I'm coming." Feng Wujiang suddenly clenched a fist. As his 5 fingers closed, the void around him was faintly distorted. The next moment, he turned into a rainbow and pounced at Lu Yi. Lu Yi was shocked. "Senior brother, calm down." Chapter 1048. A moment later, the bruised and battered Lu Yi returned to his residence and sat down silently under the slightly surprised gaze of Dao 13, who was guarding the door. Eldest senior brother is being unreasonable. He had just broken through to the Divine Sea realm and hadn't had time to consolidate his cultivation or familiarize himself with his new strength, before he was beaten up by his eldest senior brother. Although his eldest senior brother was only using the strength of a first-order divine sea realm cultivator, how could he be his opponent? Of course, Lu Yi didn't have any complaints about this. He knew that his eldest senior brother was doing this for his own good. Although this kind of tempering was a bit embarrassing, it would allow him to master his own strength faster, far better than cultivating behind closed doors. He had a hunch that his eldest senior brother's tempering was just the beginning. If he didn't want to be embarrassed, he had to familiarize himself with his new strength as soon as possible. Sure enough, the next day, just as Lu Yi was sitting cross-legged to adjust his breathing, two bangs came from outside the door, followed by Dao 13's roar that quickly faded away. Lu Yi's ears twitched. Although he didn't see it with his own eyes, he could imagine the scene outside the door. Someone must have wanted to break in, but Dao 13 had tried to stop them, and ended up being thrown away. And someone who could so easily throw away a fifth-order divine sea realm cultivator, like Dao 13. There were at least a dozen such people on the Saints' Island. The door was violently pushed open and Meng Jia, wearing a straw hat, rushed in like a bandit. From his appearance, it was obvious he had just been planting seedlings in the spirit field. Because his trousers had not been pulled down, his calves were covered in a mixture of mud and mud. "Senior Yu," Meng Jia looked at him calmly. "The Holy Master sent me here to temper you." Saying so, he reached out his big hand to grab Lu Yi. Lu Yi was completely helpless, and was picked up like a chicken before being tossed aside. Meng Jia crossed his arms and stood up. "I'll only retain the strength of a first-order divine sea realm cultivator. Go all out. There's no need to hold back. Within 1 hour, if I take a single step forward, you pass the test." "Fine, follow me to work." "That's what you said." Lu Yi raised his hand and pulled out his Panshan saber. His spiritual energy surged as he charged at Meng Jia without holding back. Lu Yi knew that he was no match for a senior like Meng Jia. However, if he could force Meng Jia to move a single step within 2 hours at the same cultivation level, he might still stand a chance. In a split second, spiritual energy surged and blade light surged. 2 hours later, Meng Jia grabbed Lu Yi, whose face was increasingly bruised and swollen, and dragged him into a spiritual field like a dead fish. He planted seedlings for the entire afternoon. The next day, the door was suddenly pushed open, and a wisp of fragrance instantly filled the room. Lu Yi looked up and saw Tofuji looking at him with a smile. Dao 13 didn't even give a warning. "Let's go." Yuji smiled happily. "Let's go." Lu Yi stood up. This afternoon, Lu Yi didn't help her sell tofu because it was already sold out. Instead, Lu Yi helped her grind soybeans. Days passed. Every day, a warm-hearted senior would come to find Lu Yi and use different methods to train his body and mind. Lu Yi was suffering and enjoying it. This was because he knew that such an opportunity was too rare. Which of those seniors wasn't the strongest in this world? If it weren't for the great opportunity of the 9 provinces, which brought them together, ordinary people wouldn't have the opportunity to let them train themselves. It was a complete waste of talent. However, in this blood-refining realm, under the request and guidance of eldest senior brother, such an opportunity presented itself to Lu Yi. How could he not seize it? Although he was tortured to death by different seniors every day, Lu Yi's progress was obvious. His divine sea realm was quickly consolidated, and he was constantly familiarizing himself with his current strength while being beaten again and again. This was mainly because even without these seniors, Lu Yi could do it himself if he spent some time. He could do these things. More importantly, the factions of the seniors were different, and their methods were different. Lu Yi's horizons were broadened, and he was able to see the exquisite methods of the top experts of the 9 regions. Moreover, he also learned how to use his own strength more effectively through the repeated confrontations. No one deliberately taught him anything. Everything depended on his own understanding, using his own pain and his own body to feel it. What could be taught was, after all, other people's things. What he comprehended was his own. If he really had to describe it, Lu Yi was like a piece of stubborn iron. The seniors hammered and hammered, making this stubborn iron become tempered thousands of times. Every day, the time spent fighting with these seniors was extremely short. Meng Jie's 2 hours was the longest, and most of them were only half an hour. For the rest of the time, Lu Yi would sometimes comply with their requests and help them with some chores, but most of the time, he was still comprehending his own body. After being beaten, there was always a value in being beaten. The temporary pain on the body turned into experience against the enemy. It was a good thing that ordinary people couldn't even ask for. Lu Yi gladly endured it. In addition, he had one more ability: blood arts. When breaking through to the divine sea realm under the blood sea, he swallowed a golden ball of light, which could turn a vampire into a holy seed. It was called the holy blood for the time being. The mysterious power of the holy blood that could turn a creature into a holy seed was burned clean by the talent tree, but the bloodline inheritance of the vampires was preserved. This was the huge amount of information that exploded in Lu Ye's mind at that time. In other words, Lu Yi as a human received the bloodline inheritance of the vampires. This was very bizarre. Blood arts were mysterious and had a strong corrosive effect on things with spirituality. This was something that had been proven in the many battles with the vampires. If a spell cultivator received such benefits, they would definitely be overjoyed, because no matter how the blood arts changed, they would transform. At the end of the day, it was still a kind of spell. However, Lu Yi was a weapon cultivator after all. He couldn't give up his current saber cultivation and switch to blood arts. Fortunately, he didn't need to give up on saber arts because the bloodline inheritance was branded in the depths of the bloodline. As long as he was strong enough, he could easily use it. Although the inheritance that Lu Yi received was not complete after being burned by the talent tree, it was still an intangible wealth. Moreover, Lu Yi was also proficient in spells. The imprint of the soaring dragon realm's origin had made him have achievements in various factions. When he disguised himself as spell cultivator Niu Meng, even Lin Yu couldn't see through his disguise as sword cultivator Li Tai Bai. If he wanted to, he could even disguise himself as a ghost cultivator. Now that he received the inheritance of the vampire's blood arts, it would only enrich his means. Among the many blood arts, there were 3 that he valued the most. The first was the blood river art. It was the kind of blood river that could only be used by vampires above the true lake stage. This kind of spell could create a convenient environment for oneself to use at any time. The environment, and on certain days, the reward for Muni's use of magic to avoid fatal injuries. This was a very practical spell. The second was the blood escape art. There were many different versions of the blood escape art in the 9 continents, but they were mostly the same. Back then, Ing Wuji had used it before. It was a secret spell used to escape. However, once it was used, the user would enter a weakened state for a short period of time. Lu Yi had never cultivated the blood escape art before, so he didn't know what the blood escape art in the 9 continents were. However, it was undeniable that the vampires had their own uniqueness in this kind of spell. The blood escape art in the 9 continents couldn't be compared to the blood escape art of the vampires. If this spell was used well, it could be used to save one's life when facing an undefeatable opponent. The third was the blood refinement art. Through a secret spell, one could condense one's own blood and turn it into essence blood. Essence blood had endless uses. If it was infused into the blood river, it could strengthen the blood river. If it was used to activate the blood arts, it could greatly increase the power of the blood arts. Small book pavilion for Jingyu's wine arts. The effects of activating the blood escape art under normal conditions and activating the blood escape art with essence blood were completely different. The latter could allow one to run faster. Everyone was competing if Qing Jia refined the deep stove and was reborn with a drop of blood. Lu Yi felt that this was a bit ridiculous. However, this was what was recorded in the blood race's bloodline inheritance, so there was no way to tell if it was true or false. He didn't need to spend any effort to cultivate 99% of the blood arts, since he had obtained the inheritance of the blood race's bloodline. These spells were imprinted in his bones and could be used at will. Of course, due to the limitations of his cultivation and proficiency, the power of the spells would be different. However, the blood refinement art had to be actively used, because it consumed one's own blood and energy to condense the essence blood. Lu Yi had been doing this for the past few days. He had already achieved results. A drop of essence blood was stored in his heart, and it contained an extremely powerful energy. Moreover, he found that the blood refinement art was extremely compatible with his body. Ordinary blood race members needed to constantly replenish themselves when using the blood refinement art, because their own blood and energy were constantly being consumed. Although Lu Yi also needed it, his situation wasn't as serious as the blood races, because his vitality was vigorous. The gift of the soaring dragon realm's broken origin had created his terrifying vitality, and as time passed, it continued to transform his physical body. In terms of physique, he wasn't inferior to a body cultivator at the same level. This wasn't just because of the early refining of dragon scales. It was also because of the subtle transformation of the soaring dragon realm's origin. Even if it was a broken origin, it was still the origin of a realm. When added to a person's body, the benefits could be imagined. With an endless stream of vitality, the blood and energy Lu Yi lost in the blood refinement art could be quickly replenished. As long as he restrained himself, the loss of the blood refinement art wouldn't affect him. However, Lu Yi could only refine 3 drops of essence blood in the end. It wasn't that he didn't want to refine more, but that he didn't have the strength to do so. The blood refinement art also had its limits. The higher one's cultivation, the more essence blood they could refine. He had just advanced to the Divine Sea realm, so 3 drops of essence blood was his limit. To him, these 3 drops of blood essence were 3 trump cards. By activating the blood essence, his explosive power would instantly increase tremendously. He even had a feeling that he could burn his blood essence to activate the blood-stained spiritual tattoos, and even transform into a beast. If that was true, then it would be good news for him. The bloodstain and beast transformation were his trump cards, but these 2 methods had always had a drawback that was difficult to eliminate. They couldn't achieve an instantaneous eruption, and they needed to constantly store up power. Chapter 1049. If Lu Yi encountered an evenly matched opponent, or an opponent stronger than him, he would still have time to store up his strength. But if he really encountered an opponent who could completely crush him, where would he find the time to store up his strength? Not to mention, in many battles, life and death could be decided in an instant. So even though he had these 2 trump cards, Lu Yi had rarely used them. If burning his blood essence could solve this problem, it would be good news for him. Lu Yi found an opportunity to test it out, and found that his guess was correct. Burning his blood essence did allow him to instantly activate his blood-stained spirit tattoo. However, with the improvement of his cultivation, the increase brought by his blood-stained spirit tattoo was no longer as great as before. Lu Yi had activated his blood-stained spirit tattoo several times before, and the increase in his strength had been considerable. But now that he had reached the Divine Sea realm, the increase in his blood-stained spirit tattoo was limited. This trump card had become somewhat useless. Fortunately, Lu Yi had more than 1 card up his sleeve. He couldn't use his beast transformation, because he needed to cooperate with Hubo. Time passed day by day, and under the tempering of a different senior every day, Lu Yi quickly grasped his own strength. In the beginning, he was one-sidedly trampled by the steel suppression, but now, he was gradually able to stand on equal footing with the seniors. This was growth, and it was something that could be felt intuitively. Lu Yi didn't think about defeating them, as that was simply unrealistic. Each of these seniors had profound cultivation, and even if they suppressed their strength, and only displayed the strength of a first-order Divine Sea realm cultivator, their many years of combat experience and vision were not something he could compare with. In their eyes, Lu Yi was just a child who was learning how to speak. Occasionally, when he had some free time, he would drink and chat with his eldest senior brother. Another day, Lu Yi pushed open the door and came out. At first glance, he couldn't help being stunned, because outside the door, led by his eldest senior brother, were many seniors. When they saw him appear, Some wore playful expressions, some smiled lightly, and others remained calm. Lu Yi suddenly wore a bitter expression. Eldest senior brother. We agreed to come one by one. In the past, there was only one senior waiting outside the door for him. But today, for some reason, all of them had come. If all of them came at once, Lu Yi wouldn't have any room to fight, and would just lie down and let them teach him a lesson. Time's up, Feng Wujiang said. Lu Yi instantly reacted, so fast. Calculating the time, it had been 3 or 4 months since he broke through to the Divine Sea realm. But recently, he had been immersed in a battle of wits with these seniors, and had forgotten some things. Junior brother, do you have anything to prepare? Asked Feng Wujiang. Lu Yi shook his head. There was nothing to prepare. When he came here, he brought Dao 13 with him. Naturally, he didn't need to prepare too much when he left. The premise was that he could escape. Let's go then, Feng Wujiang said. The group of people marched toward the Tianji Hall. A short while later, Lu Yi stood in front of the divination pillar in the divination hall. He turned around and respectfully bowed. Many thanks to seniors for taking care of me during this period of time. This junior has benefited greatly, and will not dare to forget. Tofuji pursed her lips and said with a laugh. Normally I don't see you being so scholarly and reasonable. Yet today you are putting on an act. As she said that, she took out a jade tablet and handed it to him. Take this. What was this? Lu Yi did not understand and took it. It's nothing. If anyone from the Thousand Law sect bullies you in the future, just take this out and show them. Lu Yi immediately understood that this thing was probably something similar to a token. A sword chime was heard, and a small flying sword appeared in front of Lu Yi. Jian Guhong's voice was heard. If you need the help of Beixian Sword Sect, take this to Heavenly Mountain. It's another token. Lu Yi had just put it away, when another jade tablet flew in front of him. Somewhere in the crowd, an old man said, This is my identity tablet. Although it has been many years, there should still be people from the Zonglang sect who recognize it. Take it with you. One token after another appeared, each one representing a large sect. Lu Yi put them away one by one. Not every senior had a token. For a loner like Wu Chang, even if he gave Lu Yi a token, it would be useless. He did not have a sect in the land of the 9 states. However, people like that were in the minority. Seniors, do you have any words for me? Lu Yi asked. Yu Ji said, To our sects, we are already dead. If you bring some tokens back, they might still be useful. But if you tell them that we are still alive, I'm afraid no one will believe you. You might even get into trouble. Just take care of yourself. Maybe I won't be able to go back. Lu Yi had just spoken when Yu Ji knocked him on the head. Lu Yi rubbed his head and stood obediently. He then looked at Feng Wujiang. Does eldest senior brother have any instructions for me? Recently, he would drink and chat with eldest senior brother in his free time. Eldest senior brother learned about Feng Yuechan's situation from him. But Lu Yi did not know about Qiu Min's situation. He had never met this eldest senior brother's wife, so he naturally could not tell Feng Wujiang in detail. Feng Wujiang shook his head. Don't say anything when you go back. It will only add to your troubles. If there is a day when we meet again, we will. I know. Lu Yi nodded. Time passed. Everyone waited quietly. Until an hour later, the deathly still Tianji pillar suddenly fluctuated with a subtle energy fluctuation. Compared to the normal fluctuations of the Tianji pillar, this fluctuation was almost negligible. If Lu Ye's spirit sense had not become stronger, he would not have sensed it. Every few years, Tianji would send large amounts of resources here, including but not limited to spirit pills, spirit stones, and spirit tools. After all, the environment of the blood refinement realm was not very friendly to human cultivators. Aside from the spirit energy of heaven and earth, there was no external power for humans to borrow. Aside from delivering resources, the Tianji pillar had always maintained its silent state. Now that the Tianji pillar was reacting, it was clear that Tianji was sending resources here again. The subtle energy ripples continued to fluctuate. After a long while, a large pile of storage bags appeared in front of the Pillar of Mysteries. Junior Marshal brother, it's time to go. Feng Wujiang looked at Lu Yi. Lu Yi didn't hesitate and gave Dao 13 a look. The two of them stepped forward and placed their hands on the Tianji pillar. Whether they stayed or left depended on this. In the next instant, Lu Yi's body shook as he understood that he could leave. He turned to look at Feng Wujiang and said, "Eldest senior brother, I will be back." As soon as he finished speaking, the originally subtle energy fluctuations suddenly became fierce and intense. The place where Lu Yi stood also became distorted, and the space around him rippled like water. As the ripples spread, Lu Yi's body quickly became like a lake, as if he was about to disappear from this world. On the other hand, Dao 13 didn't change at all. He simply placed his hand on the Tianji pillar and remained motionless. Rumble. Muffled thunder suddenly rolled across the sky, and a great malice descended from the heavens. In the Tianji hall, many of the elders looked up. Even with the dome blocking them, their divine senses could still see through it and clearly see what was going on. They saw that in the sky blood clouds had somehow gathered. Within those clouds red lightning flashed. Small lightning bolts quickly gathered in the clouds and formed a thick lightning bolt in the blink of an eye. It was like a lightning dragon soaring through the sky. Almost as soon as this thick bolt of lightning was formed, it fell straight down like a blood dragon from the sky, heading straight for the pillar of heaven's secrets. "Not good," Feng Wujiang shouted. He leaped up and passed through the dome of the Tianji hall to meet the lightning bolt head-on. Numerous silhouettes followed closely behind Feng Wujiang. There was also a portion of Dharma cultivators like Yu Ji who remained on the ground. Spiritual energy surged around their bodies as they unleashed exquisite Dharma techniques. Some attacked the blood dragon, while others unleashed defensive Dharma techniques to envelop the Tianji hall. Despite the sudden change, everyone cooperated seamlessly. The crackling sound was deafening. Even the top talents of the 9 states felt their eardrums hurt. This was the wrath of the heavens, the manifestation of the will of the blood refinement realm. In the past, the Tianji pillar remained silent all year round. Even when transporting resources, it was cautious. Therefore, although the blood refinement realm had its own will of the heavens, it had never been able to discover the heavens of the 9 states. But this time, the situation was different. Lu Yi used the Tianji pillar to teleport, causing a huge commotion. The will of the blood refinement realm sensed this and immediately unleashed its thunderous fury. Feng Wujiang's body was like a sun, radiating dazzling light. He was the first to crash into the blood-colored lightning bolt. His body suddenly shook. Cracks appeared on the surface of his skin, and blood spurted out. His body fell abruptly, but he didn't dodge. Figures followed closely behind, using various methods to bombard the blood-colored lightning bolt. This eruption wasn't the usual method used to train Lu Yi. Many senior experts didn't hold back at all. With such a combined force, no one in the world could withstand it. Even if it was a holy seed, it would be torn apart in an instant. But the wrath of the heavens was still the wrath of the heavens. Even if the will of the blood refinement realm wasn't as clear and strong as the heavens of the 9 states, this method still exceeded the limits of cultivators. With a loud rumble, the many figures that had rushed into the sky were like meteorites falling from the sky, scattering in all directions. But the blood-colored lightning bolt was obviously much smaller. The resistance of the strongest talents of the 9 states wasn't useless. The blood-colored lightning bolt landed in the Tianji hall in the blink of an eye. With Yu Ji as the leader, the people who stayed here and activated their defensive methods all changed their expressions. Like a hot knife through butter, the layers of defenses were broken through. Yu Ji and the others flew out in a sorry state. However, after the obstruction of the many defenses, the blood-colored lightning bolt shrank again. It was less than 20% of its original size. The change happened suddenly. From the moment Feng Wujiang rushed into the sky to the moment the blood-colored lightning bolt hit the Tianji pillar, only 2 breaths of time had passed. When Feng Wujiang and the others returned to the Tianji hall again, the place had returned to calm. Even the blood clouds that gathered in the sky had dissipated. Feng Wujiang stood in place frowning. He was faintly uneasy. Chapter 1050. Feng Wujiang was the first one to be sent flying by the blood-red lightning bolt. He was severely injured, but his divine sense had been following the blood-red lightning bolt closely. He could only watch as the blood-red lightning bolt, which had been weakened by various methods, disappeared with Lu Yi. This meant that they hadn't been able to block it to their fullest potential. Although the blood-red lightning's power had been greatly reduced to less than 20% of its original power, Lu Yi wasn't sure if he could block it. Sensing something, Feng Wujiang turned his head. His frown deepened. It was none other than Dao 13. He had expected this. Teleportation required a great deal of energy. Lu Yi had a chance to return to the 9 states, but Dao 13 might not. Now it seemed that Heaven's Secrets had no intention of sending Dao 13 back. Otherwise, they wouldn't have left him behind. This made Lu Ye's situation even worse. With Dao 13 by his side, at least he had someone to help him. Now, he had to rely on himself. At this moment, in an indescribable passage, Lu Yi felt the world spin. Even though he had reached the Divine Sea realm, and his strength had greatly increased, he couldn't avoid the vile feeling of being teleported. What made him feel even more uncomfortable was that there was a great danger rapidly approaching him from behind. The moment his figure disappeared from the Heaven's Secrets pillar, Lu Yi saw the blood-red lightning descending from the sky. He realized that it was the might of Heaven's wrath from the blood-refining realm. He saw his senior brother and the others use various methods to block it, but they weren't able to do so. The danger he felt now was clearly from the blood-red lightning that had been weakened by various methods. He knew that if he could block it, he could live. If he couldn't, he would undoubtedly die. He forcibly calmed his mind and slightly sensed the strength of the blood-red lightning behind him. He immediately gave up on the idea of returning to his senses and blocking it. Even if it had been weakened by the various means used by eldest senior brother and the others, the power of this blood-red lightning was not something he could resist. Rashly blocking it would only lead to disaster. Since he couldn't block it, he could only keep running. This was a teleportation passage. Even if the blood-red lightning behind him was the might of Heaven's wrath, after leaving the blood-refining realm, it was like a tree without a source. As long as he could delay it long enough, its power would slowly weaken. Eventually, he would be able to block it. Under normal circumstances, there was no way he could outrun the wrath of the heavens. But at this moment, he was in the middle of teleportation, and the speed he displayed was not his own speed. He could barely delay it, but the distance between him and the blood-red lightning was rapidly closing. For some reason, the teleportation this time took a long time. It was unlike before, when the teleportation was completed almost instantly. With this thought in mind, Lu Yi immediately activated one of the 3 drops of essence blood in his body. With a thought, the essence blood exploded, wrapping his body in a layer of blood mist. His speed suddenly increased, almost turning into a streak of blood light. Blood escape. This was the first time Lu Yi had used this secret technique. Moreover, he had used it with the help of his blood essence. The effect was unimaginably good. Initially, the distance between him and the blood-red thunderbolt was rapidly closing, but after he performed the blood flight art, he still could not shake it off, but the distance between them was no longer closing. This chapter is not finished. Click on next page to continue reading. Human Dao Great Saint. He did not ask any questions and continued to charge forward. From time to time, he would use his divine sense to sense the situation behind him. Just as he had thought, the blood-red thunderbolt's power was indeed rapidly weakening without the support of the blood refinement realm. As its power weakened, so did its speed, and the threat it posed to Lu Yi was gradually decreasing. 30 minutes later, the blood mist enveloping Lu Yi suddenly collapsed, and his speed returned to its original level. A feeling of fatigue assaulted him, but it was not a big problem. This was the most exquisite part of the blood refinement art. Vampires could usually condense their own essence blood and store it as a backup energy reserve. They could use it to kill enemies and escape at critical moments. Because it was a backup energy reserve, it wouldn't cause too much damage to the body as long as the body could withstand it. Lu Ye's vitality would have been damaged if he had used the blood flight art in a normal manner. At this point, Lu Yi had already given up on the idea of turning around to block. Since the blood-red thunderbolt's power was continuously weakening, it would disappear sooner or later as long as he kept running. There was no need to take the risk to block it. No matter how weak it was still the wrath of the heavens. Who knew what was behind it? The slowed blood-red thunderbolt could no longer catch up to Lu Yi, and was still weakening. It could be said that the crisis had passed. After another incense stick's worth of time, Lu Yi sensed that the blood-red thunderbolt behind him had suddenly collapsed and disappeared without a trace. My healing series game. It was only then that he relaxed. Immediately afterward, he felt as if he had passed through something. The scenery before him changed abruptly. It was no longer the bizarre and variegated transportation channel from before. What entered Lu Ye's eyes was shocking, and he was unable to recover for a long time. This was because what was imprinted in his eyes was a huge aqua-blue celestial body. It lay across the void of the universe like a dormant beast. An inexplicable sense of familiarity came from the celestial body, making Lu Yi feel as if he had returned home. He immediately understood that this huge celestial body was the 9 provinces. He had returned. Lu Yi had never thought that he would one day be able to look at the 9 provinces from this perspective. Was this a reward for his trip to the blood-refining realm? Living in the 9 provinces was completely different from standing here and looking at the entire 9 provinces. In front of such a celestial body, Lu Yi felt even more insignificant and could more deeply feel the vastness of the 9 provinces. When he had gone to the blood-refining realm, his mind had been raised, and he had seen the entire blood-refining realm. But that experience was different from this one. Back then, he had only seen it with his mind, but this time, he could see it with his naked eye. The visual impact was even more obvious. Looking around, Lu Yi felt his divine sense sublimate. But soon, his attention was attracted by some existences around the 9 provinces. This was because beside the huge celestial body, there were a large number of irregular floating continents. These floating continents varied in size, and most of them were as small as a speck of dust. But Lu Yi knew that these floating continents were not really that small. It was only because of the huge celestial body that the 9 provinces gave him a visual illusion. Among them, 2 floating continents were the largest. They floated on the left and right sides of the 9 provinces world, like 2 great protectors. This chapter is not finished yet. Click on the next page to continue reading. Human Tao Great Saint. Lu Yi looked at one of the floating continents and vaguely felt 2 mysterious connections from somewhere on that floating continent. He furrowed his brow, not knowing what these 2 connections were. Just as he was thinking, he had already rushed towards the 9 regions world at an extremely fast speed. The surface of his body was also covered with a layer of inexplicable power. Just like when he first came to the blood-refining world, there was also a layer of inexplicable power covering his body. This should be a protective power bestowed by heaven's fate. Although he did not know what kind of cultivation was required to survive in such an environment, it was definitely not something a person who had just broken through to the spirit sea realm could do. Without this protective power bestowed by heaven's fate, even a 9th order divine sea realm cultivator would quickly die here. From this point of view, heaven's fate was very trustworthy. At the very least, it knew to provide him with a safe protection. As he got closer and closer, the connection Lu Yi felt from one of the floating continents became clearer and clearer. Lu Yi finally understood what that connection was. It was his connection to the Heaven's Fate Pillars. There were countless Heaven's Fate Pillars in the 9 provinces. Lu Yi naturally had no connection to ordinary Heaven's Fate Pillars, but somewhere, there were 2 that he had spent merit points to obtain. Nominally, those 2 Heaven's Fate Pillars belonged to him, so there was naturally an inseparable connection between them. That huge floating continent was the Cloud River battlefield? The other floating continent was the Spirit Stream battlefield? If that was the case, then the floating continents surrounding the 9 provinces world should be connected to various sealed worlds. This discovery surprised Lu Yi. In the 9 provinces, whether it was the Spirit Stream battlefield, the Cloud River battlefield, or the 9 provinces world itself, there were countless sealed worlds. Lu Yi had once wondered where these sealed worlds were located. It was only today that he understood that these sealed worlds revolved around the 9 provinces world. He didn't know if anyone else had noticed this before, but he was probably the only one who could see it so clearly since ancient times. As he got closer and closer to the 9 provinces world, and the vast celestial body pounced toward him, anyone would feel reverence in their heart. Along the way, he passed by a floating continent. Lu Yi turned his head to size it up, and focused his vision. In such an environment, it was extremely difficult to judge distance. Perhaps someone with a higher cultivation would be able to make a more accurate judgment, but Lu Yi could not do so at the moment. That floating continent seemed very close to him. In reality, it was still very far away. Even when Lu Yi focused his vision, he could not see the floating continent clearly. He hastily constructed a spirit rune of insight to see what was going on. But in the next moment he frowned. He could vaguely see some creatures baring their fangs and brandishing their claws on the floating continent. Some of them were extremely large. Those were the insect race. He could not see clearly, and could not verify it further, because he was already far away from the floating continent. Lu Yi frowned. The insect race was not unfamiliar to the cultivators of the 9 provinces. Almost every cultivator would experience an insect tide in the spirit stream battlefield. In the 9 provinces world itself, there would occasionally be small-scale insect tides, but they would be quickly suppressed just like last time. In his field of vision was a churning sea of clouds, as white as cotton. He could already clearly feel a powerful pulling force from below, and his speed was growing faster and faster. This chapter is not finished yet. Click on the next page to continue reading. Great Sage of Human Tao, piercing through the sea of clouds, the familiar world pounced toward him. It was at this moment that the protection around Lu Yi suddenly disappeared without a trace. His body also plummeted straight down, like a meteor falling from the sky. His speed was so fast that it caused pain all over his body. Lu Yi hurriedly circulated his spirit energy to resist the friction. His body continued to fall, unable to stabilize at all. Cultivator's flight was not without limits. There was also a limit to how high they could go. His current position had clearly exceeded his limit. He could only continue to descend if he wanted to stabilize himself. Chapter 11 Error. Chapter 1051. Lu Yi barely regained control of his body after falling several tens of thousands of meters. This height was the limit of his flight. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't fly any higher. It was as if there was an invisible binding force that was binding him. However, Lu Yi still allowed himself to fall, and only urged his spirit energy to protect himself. Although he had the ability to fly at this height, it was too strenuous and consumed too much of his spirit energy. He had to find a comfortable and energy-efficient height. Therefore, when cultivators went out in the wild, they couldn't fly as high as they could because the higher they flew, the greater the consumption of their spirit energy. Especially when their cultivation was insufficient, they generally couldn't fly too high, because it was easy to encounter masters stronger than them. Lu Yi stopped after falling nearly 10,000 meters. This height was undoubtedly acceptable to him. It was also the height most Spirit Sea Realm cultivators would choose to go out in the wild. Looking down at the scenery below, his heart surged. 9 continents, I'm back. This trip had taken a long time, 2 full years. When he left, his cultivation was at the 7th Order True Lake Realm. When he returned, he was at the Divine Sea Realm. His strength had improved tremendously. Of course, if he was in the 9 continents, his cultivation would have improved faster, because he could use the spirit lot. But when it came to cultivation, just increasing one's cultivation was useless. In these past 2 years, he had been rushing about in the blood-refining world. Although his cultivation hadn't risen too quickly, every boundary he had reached was extremely solid. In particular, in the several months after he had broken through to the Divine Sea Realm, he had experienced the tempering of several old seniors. The harvest he had gained was great. How could a simple increase in cultivation compare with it? Tao 13 didn't come back with him, which made Lu Yi feel a little regretful. It wasn't that he wanted to abandon Tao 13, but he didn't have the final say in this matter. It was the 9 continents Heaven's secret. If Heaven's secret didn't send Tao 13 back, there was nothing he could do. He would go back to the blood-refining world. The words he said to his eldest senior brother before he left were not casual words. After the blood race encirclement, the Jade Blood Holy Land's defensive line on the outer islands had been torn open. Moreover, the Holy Land had suffered heavy losses this time. Once the blood race returned next time, the Jade Blood Holy Land might not be able to stop them. He had to find a way to go back before the next blood race encircled the Blue Blood Holy Land and help his eldest senior brother. It would be best if he could bring a group of helpers with him. Of course, it was not easy to achieve this, but since the 9 prefectures Tianji could send him there once, it could send him there twice. Lu Yi believed that Heaven's secret would not sit idly by and watch the Jade Blood Holy Land. Otherwise there would be no need to send him over. Heaven's secret's intention in sending him over this time was obvious. He wanted to borrow Lu Ye's strength to help the Jade Blood Holy Land resist the Blood Race army, and he had barely managed to do so. Whether it was controlling the Blood Race Dao soldiers or the Twin Breath Array Disc, he had made great contributions in this war. He couldn't stay in the Jade Blood Holy Land and wait, because he had to find a way to improve his strength as soon as possible. Therefore, he had to return to the 9 states and try to improve himself as much as possible before the next Blood Race army attack. He had to find a way to go back and bring a group of trustworthy helpers with him. There was still some time to slowly plan. Let's not think about this for the time being. Since I've returned to the 9 regions, the first thing to do is to determine my location. Lu Yi hurriedly took out the 10 points map to check, and the result stunned him, because the place he was at was actually Li Yuan. It was near the entrance of the Sword Instrument Sect's secret zone. This was really a coincidence. There was no need to look for the Sword Instrument Sect's secret zone. The foundation of that secret zone had been destroyed, and it had long since collapsed. Just as Lu Yi was thinking about how to return to Grand Sky City, his battlefield imprint became slightly warm. Lu Yi hadn't felt any movement from his battlefield imprint for 2 years, so he quickly immersed himself in investigating. Name Lu Yi. Identity: disciple of the Jade Blood Sect, Law Department's Law Enforcement Hall Captain. Cultivation: First Order Divine Sea Realm. Location: Li Yuan. Merit: 972,812 points. Battle merit: 1 million points. The changes in his battlefield imprint were not small. The first change was his identity. He remembered that his identity used to be below that of a disciple of the Jade Blood Sect, the Law Department's Law Enforcement Hall Captain D9. But now he had become a Law Enforcement Hall Captain. This was because his position as captain had been removed. Thinking about it, there had been no news of him for 2 years, so there had to be someone in charge of Team D9. It was impossible for them to wait for him all the time, so it was natural for them to change captains. In Team D9, third senior brother Xiaoxing, he was the strongest. If there was no accident, he should have taken over the position of captain. There was not much change in his merit. Lu Yi had returned to the sect once during his mission, and sold a large number of materials to the Heaven Secret Treasure House, collecting nearly 1 million merit. After that, he hadn't used it much, or rather, he didn't have a chance to use it. The change in his merit was big. He couldn't remember the specific number of merit he had at that time, but he knew it should be more than 200,000. But now he had 1 million merit, breaking the record again. 1 million merit couldn't come out of thin air. This was obviously a reward from the Heaven Secret Treasure House for his trip to the blood refining realm. At first glance it seemed a lot, but in fact it wasn't much, because it was the result of Lu Ye's 2 years of hard work. Moreover, during the encirclement of the Blood Race army, the Blood Race Dao soldiers under Lu Ye's command provided him with the Twin Chi Array Disc. Moreover, he had personally killed many Blood Race members, many of whom were in the Divine Sea realm. Of course, the Heaven Secret Treasure House had no way of organizing these merit, because the Heaven Secret Treasure House knew nothing about the situation of the battle. Perhaps it was because of this that the merit was given to him this time. But Lu Yi was satisfied. It was better than nothing, and it was such a huge amount of merit. Just as he was checking the battlefield mark, the mark moved slightly again. This time someone sent a message. He had just returned to the 9 states, and someone had sent a message. Without a doubt, it must be Yi. Only Yi would be able to react so quickly. It wasn't that he and Yi were telepathically connected, but that he had a pet contract with Hu Pe. And they had even formed a life origin technique and a beast seal technique. As Lu Ye's natal Yao beast, Hu Pe would definitely be the first to sense Lu Ye's return. Hu Pe and Yi were inseparable. If Hu Pe knew, Yi would know as well. He checked the message, and as expected it was from Yi. Lu Yi, you're back. Where are you? Lu Yi flew down as he replied. I'm at the Myriad Demon Ridge. Why are you there? Where have you been for the past 2 years? Although Lu Ye's status could be determined through the battlefield mark, there had been no news for 2 years, and Lu Ye's mark had always been in a state where it couldn't be contacted. It was unavoidably worrying. It's a bit complicated. I'll tell you in detail later. Is everyone okay? Everyone is fine. But many things have happened in the past 2 years. You just returned, so you must be careful. The 9 states are now filled with insect race. Lu Yi didn't have time to respond because he had already seen the insect race. A large swarm of mosquito-like things flew toward him. Most importantly, these mosquitoes all looked fierce and fiendish, and they were all unusually large. Almost every one of them was the size of a palm. Their individual strength wasn't much, and they only had the aura of the spirit stream realm. However, when they gathered together, the ferocious aura they exuded was at the divine sea realm. In terms of numbers alone, there were probably tens of thousands of them. Lu Yi had never seen this kind of insect race before, but they had a special characteristic, which was that they were extremely sensitive to the fluctuations of spiritual power. Obviously, the traces of his spiritual power had attracted this swarm of insect race. To deal with this kind of thing that was weak individually, but very powerful when gathered together, the methods that a weapon cultivator could use were very limited. It could be said that this kind of insect race had a very strong restraining power against weapon cultivators in the ordinary sense. Weapon cultivators' strength lay in one-on-one attacks. Even if Lu Yi could kill dozens or hundreds of these insect race with one slash, once he was surrounded by this swarm of insect race, how many slashes could he make? Fortunately, he wasn't a weapon cultivator in the ordinary sense. At this moment, he still hadn't realized the horror of Yi's message. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had any thoughts about this swarm of insect race. He raised his hand and clenched it. His spiritual power surged in his palm, and the yin and yang energies quickly merged. In the blink of an eye, an oval object formed in his palm. At first glance, it looked like an egg with a burning flame on its surface. With the activation of Lu Ye's spiritual power, the flame egg broke open, and a clear cry was heard. A fire phoenix with a wingspan of 300 feet rushed out and flapped its wings to meet the swarm of insect race. To deal with this kind of insect race, a spell cultivator's method was the most suitable. In the past, when he was not strong enough, Lu Yi still had to use his own body as a foundation to construct the fire phoenix spirit pattern. Now that he had reached the divine sea realm, there wasn't so much trouble. The huge fire phoenix crashed into the swarm of insect race head-on. Lu Yi thought that he could burn the entire swarm of insect race to the ground, but a shocking scene occurred. A large number of insect race were killed. As the insect race perished, the fire phoenix's body shrank rapidly. When he looked carefully again, he realized that before the mosquito-like insect race died, they were desperately devouring the spiritual power in the fire phoenix to weaken its power. The fire phoenix was destroyed, and there were about 60% of the insect race left. Lu Yi was about to attack again when a buzzing sound came from below. When he looked down, he couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. He saw a large number of densely packed insect race rising from below and gathering in this direction. They were obviously attracted by the spiritual power fluctuations just now. The number was so huge that it was simply unbelievable. Moreover, as they flew, these insect race continued to gather. The insect race cloud grew stronger and stronger, and its power also increased rapidly. In his field of vision, it was pitch black, and he could no longer see the ground. Lu Yi no longer had the desire to attack. In this situation, the best choice was to escape. Spying in a direction, Lu Yi turned into a rainbow and flew in that direction. The insect race cloud chased after him relentlessly. Fortunately, the insect race cloud wasn't fast. After flying for a while, Lu Yi finally got rid of it. A moment later, he found a hidden place to land and retracted his aura. Chapter 1052. The insect swarm hovered in the air for a while and went back to hibernation after losing sight of Lu Yi. Lu Yi's expression was solemn. He had just returned to the land of the 9 prefectures and was immersed in the joy of returning to his homeland. He did not pay much attention to it. Now he finally saw something unusual. The most obvious change was the Li Plains. The Li Plains was a huge plain. It was also a strategic buffer for the Wanmo Ridge in the military province. There was no human habitation here, but since it was a plain, it was naturally full of vitality. At the very least, when Lu Yi came here with the Nian Yuxian last time, the Li Plains was green when he looked down from the sky. However, the current Li Plains was no longer green. All that entered their eyes was desolation, without a single trace of life. Combined with the insect swarm he saw just now, Lu Yi understood the root cause of all this. Wherever the insect clan passed by, not even a blade of grass grew. There was a lot of information in the battlefield imprint, which was sent by Yi just now. Lu Yi continued to check. The more he read, the happier he was. He did not expect such a big thing to happen in the 2 years, when he was not in the land of the 9 prefectures. The insect swarm swept across the land of the 9 prefectures. The scale and intensity of the insect swarm this time was the most ferocious and terrifying in the history of the land of the 9 prefectures. Every piece of land, and every corner of the land of the 9 prefectures, was invaded by the insect clan. When the insect swarm broke out in the foggy sea last time, many sects within a radius of 10,000 miles spent a lot of effort to extinguish the insect swarm. However, the scale of the insect swarm was limited, and the impact was not great. However, the situation this time was completely different. It was no longer an insect swarm, but an insect swarm. Not only was there a large number of insects, but there were also a large number of divine sea realm cultivators among the various insects. The insect swarm broke out 2 years ago, which was almost the time when Lu Yi left the land of the 9 prefectures. The origin was a huge earthquake that swept across the land of the 9 prefectures. The whole world was in turmoil. Deep cracks appeared all over the land of the 9 prefectures. Overnight, the land of the 9 prefectures became a paradise for the insect clan. Due to the insect swarm, the dispute between the 2 camps of the Haotian alliance and the Wanmo Ridge calmed down a lot. Now almost all the cultivators were fighting against the insect clan. The cultivators understood that both the Haotian alliance and the Myriad Demons Ridge were humans after all. However, the insect race was a mutant. Under such a crisis, they could put aside the grudges between their own race. Eliminating the mutants was their top priority. According to E, these insects came from the depths of the earth. In the past, they did not appear and were not known. After all, cultivators would not go too deep into the earth because of the interference of the magnetic field. The deeper they went, the more their spiritual power would be suppressed. Therefore, the depths of the earth had always been a forbidden zone for cultivators. However, after the earthquake that swept through the entire 9 regions, cracks appeared on the ground, and the insect race emerged from underground. It was unknown how many years these insects had reproduced. There were many kinds of insects and their numbers were huge. Although the cultivators of the 9 regions had been bravely killing these insects for the past year, they still couldn't kill them all. There was no way to destroy the hive. The hive was hidden in the depths of the earth and was extremely difficult to find. Once a group of divine ocean realm cultivators went there. but they returned in failure. The deeper they went, the more insects there were, and the more their cultivation would be suppressed. Moreover, in such an environment, once a battle broke out, it would be endless. Unless they succeeded in one strike, it would be difficult to accomplish anything. This was a disaster. However, to the cultivators of the 9 regions it was also a feast, because killing the insects could earn them war merits. Lu Yi checked his war merits, and found that there were indeed a few hundred more points. To the cultivators of the 9 regions, war merits and war merits ran through their entire cultivation life. The latter was especially important, as it could be used to exchange for spiritual sticks for cultivation. Usually, there were not many ways for everyone to earn war merits. The war merits of the prefecture guards of the various regions were basically given out through their monthly salary. The amount was fixed unless they went to carry out some missions. However, killing the insects could earn war merits. It was very convenient. This led to a phenomenon. In the Cloud River battlefield, the number of cultivators decreased greatly. Basically, any Cloud River realm cultivator with a bit of ambition and foundation would leave the Cloud River battlefield and return to the 9 regions to kill the insects. Now in the Cloud River battlefield, there were basically no cultivators above the 5th order Cloud River realm. They all ran back to the 9 regions. They could not deal with the insects that were too strong. But the insect race's biggest advantage was their numbers. Although there were powerful insects, compared to their overall numbers, they were not worth mentioning. Therefore, as long as one's luck was not too bad, one could casually walk around and gain something. There was no need to mention the true Lake Realm cultivators. In these 2 years, many cultivators of the 9 regions had died, but which one of them did not gain a lot? After all, this was the territory of the myriad demon rich. It was troublesome to act with his original appearance. Although he had reached the divine sea realm, there were many people stronger than him in the vast 9 regions. He was not arrogant enough to think that he was invincible. If he could avoid trouble, he would naturally try to keep a low profile. Riding on a sword light, he rushed forward. Along the way, he encountered scattered insects from time to time. Many of them were quite strong. Lu Yi had a slight understanding of how bad the insect disaster in the 9 regions was. If the desertedly plains was like this, one could imagine what it would be like in a place with people. After traveling for 2 hours, he gained a few hundred battle merits. This made him sigh. Although the 9 regions' environment was bad, it was much easier for cultivators to obtain battle merits than before. Of course, the risks were also relatively high, but this was how cultivation was. If you wanted to obtain, you had to pay a price and take risks. Many of the insects he killed along the way were in the true lake realm. He did not encounter any divine sea realm insects, but that did not mean that there were none. Just like the mosquito-like insect he first encountered. A single insect was nothing, but once they gathered into a swarm, even he had to retreat. Suddenly a wave of spiritual energy came from a direction. Lu Yi turned his head and saw a few cultivators running for their lives in that direction. A mantis insect was chasing closely behind them. The cultivators he encountered in such a place were naturally from the myriad demon rich. In the past, Lu Yi probably would not care about the life or death of these people. The opposing factions destined him to be enemies with the people of the myriad demon rich. But the trip to the blood refining realm made him feel a lot. The biggest feeling was that the cultivators of the 2 factions could coexist peacefully. They could also unite for a goal. He had received many favors from the old seniors in the blood refining realm. Half of them were from the myriad demon rich. Of course, this was related to the special situation of the blood refining realm. It was also related to the state of mind of the old seniors. At their level, many of the grievances and grudges from when they were young could be forgotten with a smile. Before he left, many of the old seniors gave him their respective tokens. They said that if he encountered any disciples who bullied him, he should take out this token and show it to them. But from another point of view, those old seniors also had the intention of letting Lu Yi help their disciples and grand-disciples when they were in danger. It was just that some words were not easy to say. They had seen Lu Yi's ability. They knew that as long as Lu Yi was given enough time, he would definitely be able to reach their level, or even surpass them. When that time came, who would be his opponent in the 9 continents? The different tokens were a sign of trust, as well as a kind of invisible entrustment. The trip to the blood-refining realm had made some subtle changes in Lu Ye's state of mind. In the past, when he saw the cultivators of the myriad demon ridge, his first thought was how to kill them. But now he would not. Who knew if there were any descendants of the old seniors among the cultivators of the myriad demon ridge, although the probability was very small. Chapter 1053. The cultivators who were escaping were all in the true lake realm, and the spirit energy fluctuations coming from their leader were at the 6th order true lake realm. This was a 4-man team with decent strength. However, they were still being chased into a corner, because the insect that was chasing them was in the spirit sea realm. The team of 4 was out to hunt insects, and such teams could be found everywhere in the 9 provinces. At first, everything went smoothly, so they ventured deeper into the forest. Who would have thought that they would meet an undefeatable opponent? Now, one of the 4 was seriously injured, and was being held in the arms of one of their companions, covered in blood. The other 2 used their own methods to block the insect's attacks. One was a Dharma cultivator, so his techniques were quite powerful, while the other was a ghost cultivator. In such a situation, the ghost cultivator's usefulness was limited. The ghost cultivator's specialty was sneak attacks, but if they were to face the enemy head-on, their strength would be reduced. This ghost cultivator's specialty was to escape 1,000 miles away if they failed to kill the enemy. In the current situation, if the ghost cultivator abandoned his companions and fled, he would still have a chance to survive. He was the fastest, and he didn't need to be faster than the spirit sea realm insect. He only needed to be faster than his 3 companions. However, he obviously didn't have the intention to escape alone. He cooperated with the Dharma cultivator and resisted with difficulty. This kind of thing should have been done by a physique cultivator. There was originally a physique cultivator in the team, but he died gloriously. Helpless, the ghost cultivator could only replace him. Lu Yi suddenly felt that this ghost cultivator looked familiar. After taking a closer look, he couldn't help but be stunned. Why was this guy here? Wasn't he supposed to be at Lone Mountain City? Lone Mountain City was tens of thousands of miles away from here, and this place was under the jurisdiction of Dark Moon Forest Pass. What he didn't know was that someone had requested to be transferred away from Lone Mountain City in order to get rid of his shadow. As for where he was transferred, it didn't matter, as long as it wasn't at Lone Mountain City. More than 2 years ago, when the war between Dark Moon Forest Pass and Shocking Waves Lake Pass broke out, Dark Moon Forest Pass needed a large number of reinforcements, so he was transferred here. The Great Genetic Age. Sure enough, after 2 years of comfortable days, he no longer had to be on tenterhooks at Lone Mountain City. Thanks to the insect disaster, his harvest in the past 2 years was not small. Now his cultivation had reached the 6th order true lake realm. Coupled with his extraordinary background and talent, he was at least somewhat famous in the Dark Moon Forest Pass, even if he could not summon the wind and rain. Ying Wuji finally stood up. It had been a long time since Lu Yi last saw an old friend. In addition, Lu Yi already had the intention to save him. This time he no longer hesitated. The sword light beneath his feet trembled as he charged toward the battle. The spirit artifacts in Ying Wuji's hands flew as he struggled to fend off the attacks of the mantis bug. Even though it was a bug that did not have much intelligence, it was instinctive to fight and kill. It was as if it was born to be a swordsman with exquisite saber skills. The 2 mantis blades slashed at Ying Wuji from unimaginable angles, causing Ying Wuji to be flustered. Moreover, every strike was powerful and heavy. He had no choice but to abandon the usual combat methods used by ghost cultivators and face them head-on. If it weren't for the help of the spell cultivator, and the fact that the insect race didn't know how to use the power of the spirit, they would have died long ago. The gap between the true lake stage and the Spirit Sea stage was like a huge chasm. He hated anyone who used a saber, even if the other party was just a bug. No one who used a saber was good. He had already sent a message to his own past master asking for help. However, it would take time for the past master to arrive. He wasn't even sure if the past master would come. Currently, the Dark Moon Forest Pass only had the past master at the Spirit Sea realm. If the past master did not come, then they would be doomed. But even if the past master came, could they really hold on until then? As he thought about it, a huge force came from the front. Ingwuji's arm went numb. He raised it high and opened it wide. In his field of vision, the mantis bug's blade flashed with a cold light as it stabbed downward. It was so fast that it left behind a series of afterimages. Ingwuji's body went cold. He knew that his time of death had come. As a ghost cultivator, to be able to fight against a divine sea realm bug for so long was already a reflection of his strong foundation. But he could not hold on any longer. At the moment of life and death, he realized that he did not have the slightest bit of fear. He did not even have the thought of retreating. Cultivators of the 9 states, from the spirit stream realm onwards, lived in constant conflict between the two camps. In their lives, they had experienced countless big and small battles. None of them were afraid of death. It could be said that most cultivators could face their own death calmly. But even if he died, he had to die in a meaningful way. Following the thought in his heart, he pounced forward and shouted, "Go!" Even if he could only delay for a moment, he had to create a chance for his companions to escape. In his field of vision, a beam of light suddenly descended from the sky. Ingwuji did not see clearly what it was, and he did not have time to look. He thrust the short blade in his hand forward and stabbed it directly into the mantis bug's hideous mouth. His spiritual power exploded, and the mouth exploded. This was the last attack of his life. Naturally, he used all his strength. But death did not come as expected. There was a cold feeling on the top of his head, and a wet feeling slid down his cheeks. The smell of blood lingered at the tip of his nose. The mantis bug's sharp mantis blade was on top of his head, half an inch into his flesh. Just a little more, and he would have been dead. Pain came from the top of his head. Ingwuji gasped for breath. He did not know what was going on. He did not die. Not only did he not die, but he also killed this spirit ocean realm bug. In an instant, Ingwuji's eyes were wet. He really did stand up. But in the next moment, a thin line of blood appeared on the forehead of the mantis bug in front of him. That line of blood quickly spread and went straight through the bug's entire body. With a crash, the mantis bug split open from the middle. The cut was neat and clean. Dark green blood drenched Ingwuji's head and face. Ingwuji blinked his eyes. It was not until then that he saw a figure standing not far away. Just now, this figure was blocked by the mantis bug. His first impression was that this guy was really handsome. With this kind of appearance, even if he did not have much cultivation, he would be able to attract girls with just a flick of his finger. Then, a sense of horror suddenly surged from the depths of his heart. He did not know where this sense of horror came from. Anyway, the moment he saw this stranger, his heart skipped a beat. He felt inexplicably uneasy. Instinctively, he felt that this was the aftereffect of escaping death. He hurriedly took a step back and looked at the newcomer warily. He was wearing a white robe and looked like an immortal. He had a handsome face and a big gourd hanging on his waist. No one could tell where he came from, but the spiritual energy around him showed that he was a spirit sea realm cultivator. Ingwuji finally realized that he did not die. It was not that he was too powerful, but that he was saved. The light that he caught a glimpse of just now was obviously from this person's means. That should be a sword light. Only a powerhouse like that could kill a divine ocean realm insectoid so cleanly. Calming down, Ingwuji cupped his fists. Dark Moon Forest Pass, Ingwuji. Thank you for saving my life. May I know how to address you? For some reason, although he wanted to sincerely thank him, he felt a little uncomfortable. Moreover, the way the spirit ocean realm cultivator looked at him was a little strange. It seemed a little mischievous. Ingwuji could not look him in the eye. After all, he was a spirit ocean realm cultivator. It was very impolite. Moreover, he had just saved his life. You are Li Tai Bai. Behind him, the spell cultivator looked as if he had seen a ghost. He looked at Lu Yi in shock. Back then, Lu Yi had disguised himself as Li Tai-bai and fought 6 rounds with the Grand Sky Alliance cultivators at the Shocking Waves Lake Pass. He won all 6 battles. In the last battle, he killed Tan Shu, whose cultivation was several levels higher than his. At that time, many cultivators at the Dark Moon Forest Pass saw him and were shocked. Later, some news came from the young Pass Lord Linyu. This Li Tai-bai was someone who could rival the Sect Destroyer Yi. The Sect Destroyer Yi was a ferocious person. When he was in the Spirit Stream realm, he had defeated the top sects of the Myriad Demon Ridge. When he was in the Cloud River realm, he had a terrifying battle record of killing 2,000 people in one battle. He was also ranked first in the Cloud River contest. His fame was so great that Lan Zi, who was ranked second, did not even have the thought of challenging him. He was in the limelight for a while. In the same era, and in the same cultivation level, no one in the 9 prefectures could be compared to him. He was also seen as a tumor by the Myriad Demon Ridge, and wanted to get rid of him. The Myriad Demon Ridge had finally produced Li Tai-bai, so they naturally wanted to spread the news. However, what made people sigh was that Tan Shu's death triggered a war between the 2 passes. The Shocking Waves Lake Pass Lord Lu Yueme personally dealt with Li Tai-bai. She bullied the weak with her status as a Spirit Ocean Realm cultivator. In that battle, Li Tai-bai unfortunately died. When a legend fell, many Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators at the Dark Moon Forest Pass were indignant. However, he was already dead, so what was the use of being indignant? This spell cultivator was also present that day to witness Li Tai-bai's progress. The person who beheaded Tan Shu could be said to be extremely respectful towards him. However, he never expected that a person who had already died would appear in front of him again. Moreover, in a short 2 years, he had already reached the Spirit Ocean realm. He almost thought that he was dreaming. What? You are Li Tai-bai? Ing Wuji was also shocked. It had been 2 years since he came to the Dark Moon Forest Pass. Naturally, he had heard of Li Tai-bai's legendary deeds. Many people had told him about it before. He also felt that it was a pity. If the cultivators of the Dark Moon Forest Pass did not exaggerate, then Li Tai-bai really was someone who could contend with Lu Yi. It was a pity that he came too late and did not get to see Li Tai-bai's majesty. He never thought that he would be fated to meet him today. Unbelievable, unbelievable. According to his understanding, 2 years ago, Li Tai-bai was only a 3rd-order true Lake Realm cultivator. His cultivation was not much stronger than his own. In 2 years, he was already a 6th-order true Lake Realm cultivator. His cultivation was improving at an incredible speed, but Li Tai-bai had actually reached the Spirit Ocean realm. What kind of great pill did he eat? Lu Yi was not surprised that someone recognized him. He only nodded slightly. It's me. When he activated the Thousand Faces spirit inscription, he also thought about changing his face to an unfamiliar face. However, the sword gourd symbol was too obvious, so he simply used Li Tai-bai's appearance. This place was under the jurisdiction of the Dark Moon Forest Pass, so it was normal for him to be recognized when encountering cultivators from the Dark Moon Forest Pass. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.